They called him Useless Hwan, weak, useless, written off by his own brother to cover up a theft. They threw him into the ocean to die, but he surfaced and swam because a man who knew how to build a world from scratch had suddenly taken up residence in that scrawny body. Salt water stung his face, wet silk twisted his arms behind his back. Above his head, strange voices chattered in a language he hadn't known a second ago. And then he knew. A stranger's memory slammed into his head like a fist. The third son of a collateral branch of the Lee clan, Useless Hwan. His older brother had stolen the clan treasury and thrown the younger brother overboard to cover up the theft. The impact with the water knocked the wind out of his lungs. And then, in a stranger's head, a voice awoke that shouldn't have been there. The voice of an engineer from Busan. Back to the wave. Kick your legs like scissors. The silk is wet. The silk is slippery. The knot is weak because the sailors tied it as a joke. He yanked the wrist. Once. Twice. On the third pull, the rope gave way. His head broke the surface. He inhaled so greedily that he coughed and nearly went back under the wave. The ship was already sailing away. The sails had caught the wind. No one turned around. To them, he had drowned. For 4 hours he fought his way toward the shore. He counted them by the sun. The current was pulling him northeast. His legs moved on their own. His mind blocked out the rest. Don't think about the depth. Don't think about what's below. Don't think about the bridge, about the cold water of the bay, about how he'd already died once like this, in the water. Only there, it all ended. And here, for some reason, it continued. His toes scraped the bottom. His knees hit the sand, black, volcanic, hot from the sun. He crawled out on all fours and collapsed face up. And this is where the strangest part begins. The sky wasn't blue, but lilac on the horizon, and 2 moons hung over the ocean, one white as home, the other greenish, as if covered in moss. The stranger's body was shivering from the cold, skinny, weak, ribs jutting through the skin. He sat up, looked around. A tiny island, a ring of black sand around an extinct volcano, bamboo on the slope, a grunt from the thicket, wild pigs. So there's food. He licked his lips. Salt, salt everywhere. And then he spoke aloud, hoarsely, in a language no one here knew. First water, then shade, then fire, in exactly that order. And in that very second, a translucent panel unfolded before his face. Blue light, Korean characters, his language, from a past life. He read it. He reread it. He wiped his face with his wet hand and read it again. The system was called Paradise Depot, not combat-oriented, not magical. Inventory, an engineering cheat tied to survival. Points are awarded for every day lived. Rewards pour in for achievements, not swords or spells, raw materials, tools, supplies, exactly what a man of his profession uses to turn barren land into a place to live. The first task was flashing white. Obtain fresh water. Reward, a starter survival kit. He stood up. His legs buckled. He fell to one knee. He stood up again. The body felt foreign and weak, but alive. He walked along the shore. After 200 steps, he found a crevice from which water was seeping. He licked the stone. Salty. Undrinkable. A week of this would kill his kidneys. A stranger's memory confirmed it. On this island, exiles didn't die of hunger. They died of the water. Too salty to live on, and too fresh to give up right away. They drank and drank, thinking they were saving themselves, while the water killed them from the inside. He straightened up. He glanced at the fierce, scorching sun, and he smiled, because the fierce sun was exactly what he needed for a still. For 2 hours he scoured the shore. He found a black rock with a bowl-shaped hollow. He dragged it to a crevice. He scooped up some brackish water. He remembered the video he never finished in his past life. A solar desalinator. It couldn't be simpler. A bowl of water, a transparent material on top, a container at the bottom for the condensate. There was no transparent material. He combed through the thickets. He scraped resin off the trees, sticky, yellowish. He stretched it over a frame made of branches, crooked, rough, but it holds. A bowl of water. The resin film on top curves downward in a cone. A stone bowl beneath the lowest point. The sun heats the water. The water evaporates. Steam rises. It hits the cool film. It condenses. Drops run down the cone into the bowl. 6th grade physics. He placed the contraption in the sunniest spot and sat down to wait. By evening, 2 sips glistened in the bowl. Warm, slightly sweet, unsalted. He lifted the bowl with both hands. His hands were shaking. He took the first sip. He closed his eyes. He took the second. He looked at the sunset over a foreign ocean. And he laughed. Quietly, hoarsely. Not out of joy. Because for the first time, in this life and the last, he felt not like a burden, but like a person who knows how to do things. An engineer. The panel flashed. Mission accomplished. The starter kit was available. He opened the storage compartment. Inside lay a knife. Not a sword. A simple steel knife with a wooden handle. A coil of rope. Flint and steel. A piece of dry tinder. And a card with instructions in Korean. How to start a fire in damp conditions. He took everything out. The knife felt heavy and right in his hand. Someone at the top or inside this system knew what he would need, knew in advance. The thought was unpleasant. He put it off for later. Right now, the fire was more important. He gathered dry branches by the volcanic wall, found a spot out of the wind. He shaved tinder into thin fibers with his knife. He laid out the nest. He struck the flint against the striker. A spark, another. On the fourth strike, the tinder caught fire. He fanned the flames. He added branches, thinner ones, thicker ones. The fire settled and began to hum. The heat hit his face. He flinched. The first fire on the island. His fire. The panel flashed again. Achievement unlocked. Bonus points awarded. He lay down by the fire. The sand warmed his back. The stars were foreign. Not a single familiar constellation. 2 moons shimmered on the water. A pig grunted in the thicket. The waves rustled almost gently. His whole body ached, every muscle, every joint. But he was alive, and he had a knife, and a fire, and 2 sips of water a day, and a head full of knowledge about sand filters and clay ovens and bamboo water pipes. He closed his eyes. Tomorrow, a well. The day after tomorrow, a roof. He didn't yet know that in 20 days the waves would wash a half-dead girl with cat ears onto this shore. He didn't know that in 2 months a house would stand here. He didn't know that in 2 years the island would be called a kingdom, and that it wouldn't be enemies but merchants who would come to the shore. Right now, he knew one thing. He was an engineer. He had an island, and tomorrow he would start building it. His breathing evened out. Lee Do Hwan fell asleep on the black sand of the nameless island under the light of 2 strange moons. The morning with pain. His whole body ached from yesterday's swim. Muscles he had never used in his past life burned as if they were being twisted. Do Hwan sat up. He cracked his neck. It popped. He looked at his hands, thin, pale, with calluses not from work, but from clumsily grabbing ropes. The body of useless Hwan. He had inherited it along with hunger and an aching back. He stood up. First thing, water. The distiller had produced less than a sip overnight, because there was no sun, so it works during the day, not at night. 2 sips a day isn't enough. That's survival, not life. He needs a well. Someone else's memory suggested something useful. The locals on the neighboring islands dug wells at the foot of volcanic rock formations. Where the rock met the sand, the groundwater rose closer to the surface. The water was still brackish, but less so than in the stream. And if you ran it through a filter, he stopped. A filter. That's what he would build. Not just a well, but a well with a filtration system. Sand, charcoal, gravel, 3 layers. The classic scheme he'd explained to his subscribers in that video about water purification in the field. The video had racked up 12,000 views. He remembered every word. Do Hwan grabbed a knife and headed toward the bamboo thicket on the hillside. The bamboo here was thick as his arm, green and sturdy. He cut down the first stalk and nearly dislocated his wrist. His body was weak. The knife was good, but his hands were shaking. He sat down. He caught his breath. Cut the second stalk. Easier. The third. Even easier. By noon, he had 8 long bamboo tubes. 4 thick ones for the filter housing. 4 thin ones for the water line. He dragged them to the foot of the volcanic wall. He found a spot where brackish water was seeping from a crevice. He began to dig. Digging without a shovel is a special kind of torture. He used a flat stone and his hands. The black sand gave way easily, but beneath it lay a layer of clay, dense, heavy. He chipped away at it with the stone. He He tossed aside clumps of earth. He dug down a palm's depth at a time. Sweat poured into his eyes. The sun beat down on the back of his head. He took off his shirt and tied it around his head. By midday, the hole was knee-deep. At a depth of 3 palms, the clay became damp. At a depth of 5, water began to seep out of it, murky, dirty, but fresh. He tasted it on his tongue. The saltiness was gone. Only earth and clay remained. This could be filtered. He assembled a filter from bamboo. He took the thickest tube, cut off the bottom, plugged it with a bunch of grass so the filling wouldn't spill out. First layer, coarse gravel from the shore. He scooped up half a bucket. Second layer, sand, fine, washed in seawater. Third layer, charcoal. This is where he had to put in some work. He took the branches left over from yesterday's fire, charred, black. He crushed them into crumbs with a rock. The result was coarse but usable charcoal. He filled the third layer, another layer of sand on top. On top, another layer of gravel, a classic sandwich. He placed the bamboo tube vertically in the hole, secured it with stones, poured murky water on top. He waited. The water seeped through the layers slowly, drop by drop. He held out a stone bowl. The first drops were murky. He poured them out. The second batch was clearer. The third was almost transparent. He tasted it. Water. Real water. Fresh. Clean. Not perfect, with a slight taste of coal, but drinkable. He could live. He drank the whole bowl, then another. His stomach growled with happiness. The panel flashed. Achievement. First well. Reward unlocked. Potter's set. He opened the storage. Inside lay a hand-operated potter's wheel, a sack of dry clay, a collapsible kiln, and a sign with instructions. How to fire pottery with minimal fuel. In Korean. In beautiful, even handwriting. Do Hwan looked at the potter's wheel, at the kiln, at the bag of clay, and he realized that someone or something was leading him along a chain. Water, then pottery, then food, then a roof. Each reward provided not just a resource but the next step. Logical, engineering-minded, well thought out, like a good textbook where each chapter builds on the previous one. He liked it, and at the same time, it worried him. But he pushed the worry aside again. Right now, he had water and clay. So today he would make bowls. He had never worked with a potter's wheel. In his past life, he'd once gone to a workshop with a girl who dumped him a week later. The bowl had come out crooked. He'd crumpled it up and started over again. The second one turned out a little better. The third even better. By evening, he had 5 bowls, crooked, thick-walled, ugly, but bowls. He laid them out to dry on the rocks. He'd fire them tomorrow. Then he could cook in them. Then he could store water. Then he could store food. Each bowl was a step from survival to life. While the bowls were drying, he decided to make some food. He hadn't eaten anything yet. His body was starting to give out. His hands were shaking, not from fatigue but from hunger. He walked along the shore. He found a shallow spot where seaweed grew among the rocks. Long, brown, slippery. He recognized this type. In his past life, he had worked with similar ones at an agar-agar factory. Edible, not tasty but high in calories. He gathered an armful. He rinsed it in fresh water from the well, spread it out on a rock, left half to dry for later, ate the other half raw. It tasted like chewing salty rubber, but his stomach accepted it. An hour later, the trembling in his hands subsided. In the evening, he sat by the fire and thought about pigs. He'd heard them all day, oinking in the thickets, the crackling of branches. They were somewhere on the volcano's slope. Wild, small ones judging by the sound. But meat is meat. The problem was that he had no trap, no rope long enough, no hunting experience. But he did have an engineer's mind. He remembered a video he'd filmed 3 years ago. A pit trap, the simplest design. A pit, covered with branches, bait inside. A pig steps in, falls through. Done. He knew the bait. The plant roots on the slope smelled sweet. The pigs would go for the sweet smell. He chose a spot on an animal trail. Hoof prints in the mud. Droppings. They passed through here regularly. He started digging. The pit was shallow. He didn't need a deep one. Just deep enough for a pig to fall in and not be able to jump out. Knee deep for an adult. Chest deep for a small pig. He smeared the walls with clay so they wouldn't crumble. He laid thin branches on top. He covered it with dirt and leaves. He tossed a bundle of sweet roots into the center. He stepped back. He looked at it. It looked pretty good. Not perfect, but it would do for a first try. He went back to the fire. He tossed some wood on it. He lay down. His body ached even more than yesterday, but he had water. He had some sort of food. Tomorrow there would be clay and maybe meat. During the night, he woke up to a screech, high-pitched, piercing, a pig. He jumped up, grabbed a knife and a burning branch from the fire, ran to the trap. A piglet was thrashing about in the pit, small, black, angry. It was squealing and scraping the sides with its hooves. Do Hwan crouched down. He looked at it. The piglet looked at Do Hwan. Its little eyes were filled with rage and terror. Do Hwan thought, meat is good, but a live piglet is better. A live piglet is future meat, lots of meat, if he raises it, if he tames it, if he builds a pen. He took a rope from the storeroom. He tied the piglet's legs. He pulled it out of the pit. The piglet bit and squealed. Do Hwan carried it back to camp. He tied it to a rock. He gave it water and sweet roots. The piglet gobbled up the roots and bit his finger. His finger bled. Do Hwan wrapped it in a leaf and smiled. Welcome to the farm. The panel didn't flicker. The taming didn't count, because tying it to a rock isn't taming. Logical. The system understood the difference. He lay back down by the fire and listened to the piglet grumbling in the dark. The second day was over. He had water, fire, clay, 5 crooked bowls, a bamboo filter, and an angry black piglet tied to a rock. That was more than he had yesterday, and tomorrow there would be even more. On the 5th, the third day, he fired the first batch of bowls. The kiln from the potter's kit was simple to use. A clay box with holes for airflow, coals inside, bowls on top, cover with a lid. Wait 4 hours. He waited. He stoked the fire. He monitored the temperature by the color of the coals. Orange ones weren't enough. White ones were too much. Yellow ones were just right. 3 out of 5 bowls survived. 2 cracked. 3 usable ones meant 3 containers for water, food, and storage. He turned one over in his hands. Rough, uneven, grayish red, but sturdy. He tapped it with his finger. A ringing sound. Well fired. The engineer inside him approved. In 3 days, the piglet got used to the rope and stopped squealing, but it wouldn't let him near. It hissed. It bared its teeth. Do Hwan fed it 3 times a day. Roots, seaweed, leftovers. He poured water into a hollow in the rock. The piglet drank without taking its eyes off him. Angry little eyes. Do Hwan talked to it in Korean. He told it about concrete technology, about how canals were built in the 16th century, about the thermodynamics course he barely passed in his 3rd year. The piglet listened, not because it understood, because the voice was calm, and next to the voice was food. On the 6th day, for the first time, the piglet didn't pull its head away when Do Hwan reached out. On the 7th, it let him scratch it behind the ear. The panel flashed. First tamed animal, reward, herder's kit, with a salt lick, a pen fence, a leather harness. Do Hwan placed the salt lick in front of the piglet. It walked over, licked it, and for the first time looked at him without hatred. Now the roof. He chose a spot at the edge of a bamboo grove, sheltered from the wind on 3 sides by a volcanic wall. The 4th side opened onto the ocean. This was important. To see the ocean meant to see danger in advance. A bamboo frame, 4 posts dug into the ground, cross beams tied together with rope. He covered the roof with palm leaves stacked in 3 layers. He smeared clay over the top. The floor was earthen, tamped down. In the corner was a place for a fire. Nearby were his simple belongings. A knife, a flint, bowls. The filter stood outside by the well. A water pipe made of bamboo led from the well to the hut, the simplest kind, gravity-fed. A 2-cubit drop provided a weak but steady flow. Water dripped from the pipe into a stone basin at the entrance. You could wash your face without leaving the house. The panel responded. The first roof. A reward. A carpenter's kit. A plane. A saw. A box of forged nails. He took the saw in his hands and almost cried, not from emotion, but from relief. Cutting bamboo with a knife was torture. The saw changed everything. With the saw, he could build faster, more precisely, more of it. He immediately sawed 2 bamboo trunks into planks, even, identical. From them, he made a shelf for bowls, the first piece of furniture in his house. Then a bench, then something resembling a table. By evening, the hut looked like a home rather than a burrow. He stood in front of it and looked. Walls of bamboo and clay, a roof of leaves, a doorway without a door. Inside, a table and a bench and a shelf with 3 bowls. Water drips from a bamboo pipe by the entrance. Nearby, a mesh pen where a black piglet licks salt. It's not much. It's insignificant by the standards of any civilized world. But it's his. Every plank, every nail, every crooked bowl. He built this with his own hands from nothing. The engineer inside him was satisfied. The man inside him wasn't so sure. Because the man understood that he wouldn't last long on his own. He needed people, and there were no people on this island. The second week was spent working. He expanded the well, reinforced the walls with stone and clay. He made a cover to keep out rain and dirt. He built a second distiller on the shore, bigger, more efficient, with a double condenser made of bamboo pipes. Now there was enough fresh water for drinking, cooking, and washing. He began to cook meals, rice from the storage. The system had given him a small bag of seed-quality rice. He cooked some of it. He set some aside for planting. Cooked rice with seaweed and boiled roots. It was his first proper meal in 10 days. He ate from his crooked bowl while sitting on his crooked bench in his crooked hut and smiled. Because the rice was cooked just right, fluffy, soft, just the right amount of salt. He was a food industry process engineer, and he remembered the exact temperature and cooking time for each variety. On the 12th day, he began exploring the island. Until then, he had known only the shore and the slope. Now, with a saw and a knife, he cut his way through the thickets deeper into Waro. The island was larger than it appeared from the shore. The volcano in the center rose 300 meters. The slopes were overgrown with bamboo and shrubs. On the northern side, he found a flat area with soft soil, terraces, natural steps on the volcano's slope, created by ancient lava flows. He stood and looked at them and saw rice fields, not yet existing, but already designed in his mind. Water flowing from the summit through bamboo pipes, terraces lined with clay walls, seedlings on the lower, warmer levels, gravity irrigation. He took out a stick and sketched a diagram on the ground. Then he erased it. He drew it again. Better. That's for later. Right now he's alone, and the terraces need hands. Lots of hands. On the southern side of the island, he found something interesting. A deep cove enclosed on both sides by rocky outcrops. The entrance is narrow. Inside, the water is calm, even when there are waves outside. A natural harbor, the perfect place for a dock, if ships ever come here. He made a mental note. On the eastern side was a cliff, a high one, with a good view. From there you could see the ocean all the way to the horizon. A lookout post. He remembered that too. It was the third week. He worked every day from dawn to dusk. His hands were covered in calluses. Real ones, workers' calluses. His body was still thin, but had stopped trembling. Muscles had appeared. Not big ones. Lean, functional. He ate 3 times a day. Rice, seaweed, roots. Sometimes fish he caught on a homemade fishing line made of fibers. A piglet he named Heguk, which means black pig, followed him like a dog. It grew fat on roots and scraps. Life on the island had turned into a routine. Hard, monotonous, almost peaceful. He had almost gotten used to it. He had almost stopped waking up with a taste of salt in his mouth. Almost. On the 20th day, in the morning, he climbed the eastern cliff as he did every morning, to check the horizon. The horizon was empty, as always. He had already turned to go back down when, out of the corner of his eye, he noticed a dark spot on the surf line, on the northern shore, where the current carried out everything that floated in this part of the ocean. He looked closer. The spot wasn't moving. He climbed down from the cliff. He walked along the shore. Then he ran. Because the spot wasn't a log or debris, it was a body, small, twisted, lying on the black sand right at the water's edge. The surf lapped at his bare feet. He ran up, fell to his knees, turned her over. A girl, young, skinny beyond belief, skin sunburned and covered in a crust of salt, tangled hair, tattered clothes made of coarse fabric, and on her head, he blinked, ears, not human, feline, triangular, pressed against the skull. They twitched when he touched her neck. There was a pulse, weak, thread-like, but it was there. She was alive. A stranger's memory kicked in again. Nekoama, the cat people, pearl divers. They were sold, bought, used, thrown away when they broke. Judging by the marks on her wrists and ankles, this one had been kept in chains, and then discarded, just as he himself had been discarded. Do Hwan didn't stop to think. He picked her up. She weighed less than a piglet, carried her to the hut, laid her on his bench, lit a fire, boiled water, made a thin rice broth, almost a broth, warm, seasoned with seaweed. He lifted her head. He poured a spoonful into her mouth. She coughed, but she swallowed. Another spoonful, another. He moistened her face with fresh water, wiped the salt from her skin, gently washed the burned areas. She didn't open her eyes, but her breathing became more even. More even meant better. He sat down beside her, watched her, at her cat-like ears, quivering in her sleep. At her thin arms, marked by rope, she was about 18, maybe 19. No one had asked him if he wanted to be responsible for someone else's life, but the ocean had washed her up on his shore, and he was the only one who could help her. He covered her with a piece of cloth from the storeroom. He placed a rolled-up shirt under her head and stayed sitting beside her. The piglet Haeguk came over and nudged her palm with his snout. She didn't wake up, but her fingers twitched. She didn't regain consciousness for 2 days. Do Hwan fed her rice water every 2 hours, spoonful by spoonful, moistened her lips, changed the bandages on her burns. Her body was thin and broken. Her ribs stuck out like his piglets on the first day. The rope marks on her wrists were old, several layers, so she'd been tied up more than once and for more than a month. A brand burned into her left shoulder. A stranger's memory prompted him. The brand of the pirate ship Red Eel. Slave traders. They kept the Nikawama for pearl diving. Fed her once a day. Beat her for every shell without a pearl. When a diver stopped turning a profit, they threw her overboard. Like trash. Like him. On the 3rd day, she opened her eyes. Yellow, with vertical pupils. Feline. She saw him and jerked backward. Her back hit the wall of the hut. She hissed. Literally hissed. Her upper lip curled, bearing small, sharp fangs. Her ears flattened against her head. Her body tensed into a ball. She was ready to fight. Or run. Hwan didn't move. He sat where he was, 3 steps away. He slowly raised his hands, showed his palms, empty. Then he slowly picked up the bowl of rice broth. He set it on the floor between them. He stepped back, further still. He sat down against the wall across from her and said nothing. She looked at the bowl, then at him, then at the bowl. The smell of food worked better than any words. She darted toward the bowl, grabbed it with both hands, began to drink greedily, burning her mouth, coughing. The broth dripped down her chin. She finished drinking and looked at him. Her eyes were filled with hunger and fear. He silently took out a second bowl, placed it in the same spot, stepped back. She drank the second one, then the third. After the third, she threw up. Her stomach had forgotten how to handle food. Do Hwan cleaned up after her without a single word. He brought water, clean, fresh. She drank it and lay down. She fell asleep instantly, as if a switch had been turned off. The following days were the same. He brought food. He placed it on the floor. He stepped back. She ate. He brought water. She drank. He left for work. She stayed in the hut. He never once tried to touch her. Never once came closer than 3 steps. Never once spoke first. He knew. Not from someone else's memory. From his own. From the wildlife documentaries he used to watch at night in his past life instead of sleeping. Trust cannot be forced. Trust must be earned with silence and food and time. She is not an animal. She is a human. But she had been treated like an animal for so many years that her body remembers only that. On the 5th day after waking up, she stepped out of the hut. He was by the well, washing the filter. She stood in the doorway and watched. He kept working, didn't turn around. She took a step outside, then another. She approached the piglet's pen. Haeguk nudged her palm with his snout. She pulled her hand back. Then she held it out again. The piglet licked her fingers. Her ear twitched. One, the right one. Do Hwan saw it out of the corner of his eye and almost smiled, but he didn't, because she would have noticed and hidden herself away again. By the end of the first week, she had begun to walk around the camp, silently, cautiously, like a cat in a strange territory. She sniffed every object. She touched the tools. She looked at the still with an expression as if it were performing magic. Once, Do Hwan returned from the shore and saw that the bowls on the shelf were arranged by size. He hadn't arranged them. She had. He said nothing. In the morning, he found that the water in the bowl by the entrance was filled to the brim. He hadn't filled it. She had. She began to help, silently, without asking, without words. On the 10th day, she spoke. He was repairing a bamboo pipe that had started leaking at the joint. He was crouching down. He was coating the joint with beeswax. She came closer than usual, just 2 steps away. He could feel her gaze on the back of his neck. And then she said one word. Her voice was hoarse and quiet, as if her vocal cords had how to work. She asked, "Why?" One word. He didn't turn around. He kept applying the wax. He understood the question, why he feeds her, why he doesn't touch her, why he doesn't brand her, why he doesn't tie her to a post. Why was he acting as if she were human? He answered without turning around. Because the pipe was leaking and he needed her hands. If she wanted to help, she should hold this end. She was silent for a moment, then she walked over. She grabbed the pipe. She held it tight. Her hands were shaking, but she held on. He sealed the joint. He checked it. No leak. He said, "Good, thanks." He stood up. He walked over to the fire. She stood there with empty hands, watching his back. And he knew she was crying. He could tell by the way her ears were trembling. But he didn't turn around, because right now, she needed to cry alone. Her name was Yoon Sa. He learned her name on the 12th day. She said it so quietly that he had to ask her to repeat it. She repeated it a little louder. Yoon Sa. And she fell silent for the rest of the day, as if she had given away the last thing she had left. Her name was the only thing the slave traders couldn't take away, until Hwan started calling her by name. Not often, once or twice a day, when he handed her a bowl. "Yoon Sa, here's some rice." "Yoon Sa, do you want some water?" Every time he said her name, her ears perked up for a split second. Then they would press back down. But with each passing day, that split second grew a little longer. By the end of the 3rd week, she began to speak for real, in fragments, short phrases. She told him she was 19, that she had been sold at the age of 7, that she had been diving for pearls for 12 years, that Red Eel had cast her aside because she had started coughing up blood and had become useless, that she thought she would die in the water, that she didn't remember how she ended up on the shore. She spoke calmly, without tears, as if she were reading someone else's story. Do Hwan listened in silence. He didn't interrupt. He didn't even say, "Uh-huh." He didn't say it was terrible. She knew it was terrible. She didn't need anyone to confirm it. When she finished, he asked, "Could she dive?" She looked at him warily. Her ears flattened. He quickly added, he needed help. He needed to know what was at the bottom of the cove. Rocks, reefs, depth. If she agreed to help, he would build her a room, a separate one, with a door, with a lock on the inside. She was silent for a long time. Then she asked, "With a door?" He nodded. "With a door that locks only from the inside." She agreed. He began to build an extension to the hut, a separate entrance, thicker walls, bamboo and clay and stone, a 3-layered roof, the floor not made of earth but of bamboo planks, so it wouldn't be cold, and the door. He spent a whole day on the door, made of planks, on leather hinges, with a bolt, a wooden one, that moved only from the inside. He showed her, "Here's the door, here's the bolt. It moves only from your side, not from the outside." She stood and looked at the door, at the bolt. She touched it, moved it back and forth. He worked. She checked. Then she went inside, closed the door. He heard the bolt click, and silence. Long. He went over to the fire, cooked rice. An hour later she came out. Her eyes were red. She didn't say anything. He didn't ask anything. He poured her a bowl of rice. She sat down next to him, not across from him like before, beside him, a step away. She ate in silence. Her ears were pricked, both of them, for the first time ever. In the morning she was diving in the cove. He stood on the shore and waited. She went underwater, and his heart tightened because she didn't resurface for a minute. 2. 3. Neko Ama could hold her breath. He knew that. But 3 minutes is 3 minutes, and he was already ready to jump in when she surfaced. With a smile. The first smile he'd ever seen. Toothy. Feline. Wide. She told him that the bottom of the cove was sandy, 4 or 5 body lengths deep. There's a reef at the entrance, but there's a passage. And there are oysters. Lots of oysters on the rocks at the entrance. He asked about pearls. Not for sale. For her. She deserved it. She looked at him strangely. Dived again. Surfaced 2 minutes later. A small pearl lay in her palm. A bit cloudy. The size of a fingernail. She held it out to him, proud. He rolled the pearl between his fingers and said it would make an excellent ball bearing. Yoon Sa didn't know what a bearing was, but she remembered that her pearl was the best. and at that moment, her ears stood so high that they were probably visible even from the ship that had cast him into the ocean a month ago. Yoon-sa regained consciousness on the third day. Do Hwan didn't approach her and fed her in silence. She began helping out around the camp. She told her story. A former pearl diver sold at the age of 7. Do Hwan built her a room with a door that bolted from the inside. She dived into the bay and found the sandy bottom, oysters, and pearls. Yoon-sa smiled for the first time. The second month began with rain. A tropical downpour came at night without warning. Water lashed against the hut's roof so hard it seemed the walls were about to collapse. Do Hwan jumped up. He ran out into the torrents of water and checked the well first. The lid was still on. The filter hadn't been flooded. He turned back toward the hut. The roof was leaking in 3 places. The clay was getting soggy. He plugged the gaps with tufts of grass. In the morning, when the rain had subsided, he inspected the damage. The palm leaf roof couldn't withstand a real downpour. He needed different material. He needed bricks. He needed roof tiles. There was clay. He knew where to get it. There was a whole layer at the foot of the volcano, but clay was only half the battle. To make good bricks, you need firing. To fire them properly, you need a kiln. A real one. Not a kiln mold from a potter's kit, but a full-fledged kiln with draft and temperature control. He sketched in the sand all day. Yoon-sa sat nearby and watched. She didn't understand the drawings, but she liked watching him work. Her ears turned toward every sound, but her eyes always returned to his hands. He explained aloud, not for her, for himself. He always thought out loud when he was designing. A camera on a tripod in his past life. Yoon-sa in this one. The difference is small. He spent 5 days building the kiln. A stone foundation. Walls made of clay mixed with fine gravel. The firebox at the bottom. The firing chamber at the top. A chimney made of bamboo coated with 3 layers of clay. Draft was critically important. Without proper draft, the temperature wouldn't rise high enough. He recalled a lecture on thermal engineering. The height of the chimney determines the strength of the draft. The higher it is, the stronger it is. He extended the chimney to 3 meters. He reinforced it with stones and rope braces. The structure looked like a crooked tower, but it worked. The first test firing produced a temperature sufficient for the bricks. The clay turned to stone. Reddish-brown, heavy, strong. He tapped the first brick with a knife. It rang out clearly. Good. Yoon-sa helped. She carried the clay in bowls. She kneaded it with her feet. She shaped the bricks in wooden frames that he had carved from bamboo. She worked silently and quickly. Her hands were stronger than they looked. 12 years of deep-sea diving had hardened her muscles to the stiffness of steel. She lifted stones that Do Hwan could barely budge. He tried not to show his surprise. She tried not to show that she noticed his surprise. A working rhythm settled between them. He told her what to do. She did it, without objection, without questions. It was convenient but unsettling. She was used to obeying. She did everything not because she wanted to, but because she was afraid that otherwise she would be fired. He saw that, and he didn't know how to break this cycle. Once she brought a stone that wasn't the right size. He said this one wouldn't do. She flinched, froze. Her hands holding the stone hung limply. Her ears flattened against her head. Her whole body turned to stone. She waited for the blow. Do Hwan looked at her and felt something twist inside him. Cold, heavy. He showed her another stone. This is the one we need. About this size. She nodded. She brought the right one. He said okay. She looked at him for a long time, as if searching for a catch. She didn't find one. She went to fetch the next stone. That evening, for the first time, she sat down to dinner not a step away from him but right next to him, shoulder to shoulder. And when he handed her the bowl, their fingers touched, and she didn't pull her hand away. By the end of the second week of the second month, he had a wall. A real wall made of fired brick. He built it around the north side of the hut, the windiest side, then the west, the east. He covered the roof with tiles, flat, heavy, clay. Each tile fired in his own kiln, laid overlapping, caulked with clay mortar. Rain no longer frightened him. It ran down the tiles and fell from the edge of the roof into a gutter that Do Hwan had dug around the perimeter. The gutter led to a barrel. Clay. Fired. The first large container from his kiln. Rainwater. Clean. Free. An additional source. He stood in front of the house and looked. It was no longer a hut. It was a house, with brick walls and a tiled roof and doors. two of them, his and hers. A bamboo water pipe at the entrance. Nearby, a pen with a piglet that had doubled in size. A little further away, the kiln. Smoke curled from the chimney. A well with a lid. Two distillers on the shore. A garden bed with seaweed that Yoon-sa had transplanted from the rocks into the shallow water closer to the house. This wasn't survival anymore. This was life. Small, fragile, but life. The panel registered it. The first roof made of fired material. Advanced construction. Bonus. The system dispensed a bag of seeds. Rice, beans, vegetables. He looked at the seeds and thought of terraces, of rice paddies, of how this is too much work for one person. For two, too. He needs people. But people don't grow on trees. On this island, there's only him, and Yoon-sa, and the piglet. In the middle of the second month, a storm brought debris, pieces of wood, shreds of sailcloth, smashed barrels, and on one of the pieces of debris lay 3 people. Do Hwan saw them from the eastern cliff, 2 men and a boy, or what was left of them. He climbed down. Yoon-sa ran after him. He reached the debris, checked their pulses. One man was dead, the other was alive, barely breathing. The boy, about 10 years old, was alive, unconscious. He turned the living man over and saw a tattoo on his neck. Yoon-sa beside him exhaled sharply, almost growled. She knew that tattoo. The red eel, pirates, the very ones who had held her captive for 12 years. She stood over the body, breathing heavily. Her hands were clenched into fists. Her ears were pressed flat. Her fangs were bared. Everything was fighting inside her. Hatred and fear, rage and memory. Her body remembered the chains. Her body remembered the beatings. Her body remembered the hunger. Her body wanted these two to die on this shore. She looked at Do Hwan. She waited. He was silent. He looked at the man, at the boy, then at her. He spoke softly. Yoon-sa, you decide. It's your pain, not mine. If you say no, he'll drag them back into the water, and he won't say a word. She looked at him, then at the boy. The boy was thin, just like she had been when she was washed ashore. There were rope marks on his wrists, just like hers. She stood there for a long time. The wind ruffled his tangled hair. Then she bent down, picked up the boy, held him close, and carried him toward the house, without saying a word. Do Hwan lifted the man, heavy, stocky, a former rower, judging by the calluses, not a pirate by choice, a slave, just like her. He dragged him to the house, laid him on a bench. Yoon-sa put the boy to bed in her room, in his own spot. She sat down by the door, guarding him. Do Hwan prepared a broth. The man came to by evening. He didn't speak. His throat was injured, an old scar from a rope. He had been strangled. He looked at Do Hwan with the same expression Yoon-sa had on the first day. Fear, anticipation of a blow, disbelief. Do Hwan placed a bowl of the broth in front of him. He stepped back. The man drank. The boy woke up the next morning. Yoon-sa was feeding him, gently, spoonful by spoonful, just as Do Hwan had fed her 3 weeks ago. The boy clung to her hand and wouldn't let go. He didn't know who she was. She didn't know who he was, but they both bore the same rope scars, and that was enough. The man's name was Kang. The boy's was Tori. Kang was a fisherman from the eastern archipelago, captured 5 years ago. Tori was a merchant's son, taken for his father's debts 2 years ago. The red eel had crashed on the reefs during a storm. They had survived on the wreckage. The others had not. Now there were 4 of them. Kang could not speak, but worked for 2. He was a fisherman, and his hands remembered how to weave nets. Do Hwan gave him some rope, and in a day, Kang wove a net that they set in the cove. The first catch. Fish. Real fish. Fresh. Yoon-sa cleaned and prepared it. Tori hauled firewood for the campfire. Small, but stubborn. He didn't talk about the past. At all. But next to Yoon-sa, he calmed down and even fell asleep. Do Hwan watched them and thought that his island was no longer his. It had become theirs. And that was right. By the end of the second month, he had expanded the house. 2 more rooms, for Khan and Tori. Each with a door, each with a bolt on the inside. Yoon-sa saw it and said nothing, but her eyes sparkled. She understood. A door with a bolt isn't just an architectural feature. It's a promise. They won't take you away here at night. Here you are safe. Here you are a person. The four of them had dinner together. Rice, fish, boiled seaweed. Kang ate in silence. Tori fell asleep with his face in his bowl. Yoon-sa cradled his head in her lap. Do Hwan sat and stared into the fire. 2 months ago he had fallen into the ocean, alone, nameless, homeless, without a future. Now he had a thatched house and a stove and a well and 4 living creatures, including a piglet, who depend on him. And for the first time, it didn't scare him. It felt right. The 3rd month began with rice. Do Hwan stood on the terraces of the northern slope and looked down. 4 steps, each 3 paces wide, 20 paces long. He had leveled them out in a week. Kang helped carry stones for the edging. Yoon-sa mixed clay for waterproofing. Even Tori carried small stones in a basket that Do Hwan had woven for him out of bamboo, made small on purpose so the boy wouldn't strain himself. The edging is ready. The clay coating at the bottom of each terrace prevents water from seeping into the ground. A bamboo water pipe from the stream on the hillside supplies water to the top terrace. From there, it flows by gravity to the 2nd, then to the 3rd, to the 4th. A closed cycle. Rice fields. He planted the seedlings. The seeds from the system's reward had sprouted in 4 days in a damp cloth by the stove. Green shoots, thin, delicate. He stuck them into the wet soil of the terraces one by one, row after row. His back ached. His knees were covered in mud. The sun was scorching. Yoon-sa worked beside him. She planted the shoots faster than he did. A diver's fingers are accustomed to precise movements in the water. On land, they worked with even greater precision. By evening, the top terrace was planted. He stood at the edge and looked at the even rows of seedlings in the murky water, green against black, beautiful and terrifying. Because if the rice didn't grow, they would have a problem. The warehouse issued a sack of rice every few days. That was barely enough for the 4 of them. But more people would arrive. He could feel it. The ocean brought debris and people with equal regularity. Kang turned out to be a gift, a mute fisherman with hands that remembered everything. He mended the nets faster than Do Hwan could tear them. He knew the currents near the shore, knew where the fish went in the morning and where in the evening, knew which seaweed was edible and which was poisonous. During the 1st week of the 3rd month, he caught so much fish that they had to think about storage. Do Hwan built a smokehouse, a simple one, a stone box with a bamboo grate, smoldering wood chips at the bottom, fish on top, hot smoke, 4 hours. Smoked fish keeps for a week without a refrigerator, 2 weeks if rubbed with salt. He had salt. He evaporated it from seawater in flat clay pans in the sun, white crystals on red clay. A simple technique, as ancient as the ocean itself. Tori had become attached to Yoon-sa. He followed her like a shadow. He slept in her room. She didn't mind. On the contrary. With the boy by her side, she changed. Her shoulders relaxed. Her voice softened. She taught him to swim in the shallow waters of the cove. He squealed and laughed. She smiled. Do Hwan saw this and understood. It wasn't him that Yoon-sa needed. She needed someone she could protect. Someone weaker than her. Tori gave her that. And she blossomed. Her ears stood upright all day. She began to hum, quietly, without words, a melody she remembered from childhood. Do Hwan heard it through the wall and paused for a second every time. In the middle of the 3rd month, an event occurred that changed the island's status. Do Hwan found a crystal. More precisely, the system gave it to him. A small, cloudy pebble the size of a fingernail, bluish, warm to the touch. He rolled it between his fingers. He didn't understand what it was. The panel offered no explanation. It simply added a line to his inventory. A mana crystal. 1. He shrugged and tossed it into a bowl of fishing weights. 3 days later, the system gave him another one, then another. By the end of the week, he had 5 stones in the bowl. He used 2 as weights for Kana's fishing line. They worked perfectly, heavy and compact. Yoon-sa saw the weights and froze. She walked over. She took the fishing line in her hands. She looked at the stones. Her ears flattened. She turned to Do Hwan and said very slowly and clearly, "These are mana crystals." He nodded. "Yeah, the system gives them out. Handy weights." Yunsa looked at him as if he had lost his mind. She said that a single crystal like that was worth a fishing village, that a handful of such stones could get families killed, that admirals start wars over the reefs where they're mined. And here he was, hanging them on a fishing line. Do Hwan removed the crystals from the line. He looked at them again. 5 small, cloudy pebbles. A fortune in a world where magic is expensive and resources are scarce. He put them in a separate bowl, covered it with a lid, took it inside. This changes everything, and not for the better. Wealth that's visible attracts those who are used to taking it. He thought about it all evening, sat on the eastern cliff and looked out at the ocean. The horizon was empty. Empty for now, but sooner or later someone would come. A merchant, a scout, a pirate. And they would see an island that shouldn't be like this. A brick house, an oven, rice terraces, a smokehouse, a well. On a ghost island where exiles are supposed to die within a month. Someone will ask questions. Someone will tell others. And then it will begin. He went down. He called for Khan and Yunsa. He put Tori to bed. They sat by the fire. Do Hwan spoke, straightforwardly, without embellishment. The island is growing. That's good, but a growing island is visible, and there are people who will want to take it. He needs protection, not walls and swords. He is not a warrior. He needs a different kind of protection. A cove with a narrow entrance is a natural fortress. If he places underwater stakes at the entrance, any ship will run aground on them before it enters. Yunsa knows the seabed. She can show where to place them. Kong knows the currents. He can tell where they'll approach from. Do Hwan knows engineering. He can build it. Yunsa listened in silence. Then she nodded. She'll dive tomorrow and mark the seabed. Kong banged his fist on his knee. Agreed. Do Hwan looked at the two of them. A month ago, he was alone on a deserted island. Now he has a team. A small one. Broken, but a team. One that trusted him. He didn't know what he'd done to earn that trust. Probably because he didn't demand it. He just built. He just fed them. He just installed doors with bolts. The next 2 weeks were spent fortifying the cove. Yunsa dived every day. She marked the seabed with stones. Do Hwan cut bamboo stakes, sharpened them, singed the ends for strength. Kang helped drive them into the seabed in the shallows. The work was hard. The stakes went into the sand reluctantly. They had to hit the top of each stake with a rock while standing chest deep in the water. By the end of the second week, the entrance to the cove was studded with stakes underwater. It's not visible from the shore. It wasn't visible from the sea. Only Yunsa knew where the passage was. It was narrow, just wide enough for one ship, and only if you knew the channel. He also set up a signaling system. On the eastern cliff, he built a small stone tower. Inside were dry firewood and resin. A single spark was enough, and a column of smoke could be seen from every point on the island. Tori was given a task. Every morning, sit on the cliff and watch the ocean. If you see a sail, run to the tower and light the fire. The boy took this so seriously that he began getting up before dawn. Yunsa grumbled that he wasn't getting enough sleep. Tori didn't listen. He had a duty, the first one of his life, a lookout, the end of the 3rd month. The rice on the terraces had begun to grow. Green stalks rose a hand's breadth above the water. Do Hwan checked on them every day. He touched the leaves. He looked at the color. He recalled everything he knew about rice farming, and he knew a lot. 4 years working at a grain processing plant. He knew the varieties. He knew the diseases. He knew when to water more and when to water less. He knew that this variety would ripen in 4 months if the temperature was stable. The temperature was stable. The tropics. Sun every day, rain once a week. Perfect. He looked at the rice and thought, by the 6th month, there would be the first harvest, if there were enough hands to gather it, if no one came to take it first. Do Hwan planted the rice terraces. Kang fished and helped with the construction. Tori became the lookout. Yunsa blossomed beside the boy. Do Hwan discovered that the murky pebbles from the system were mana crystals of incredible value. He realized that the growing island would attract attention. He fortified the bay with underwater stakes and built a signaling system. By the 4th month, a boat had sailed up to the island. Not a wreck, not a raft, a real boat, small, with a single sail. Tori saw it at dawn and ran over, gasping for breath. The sail, white, won. Do Hwan climbed the cliff. The boat was coming from the southwest. Slowly, the sail was sagging. Either there was no wind, or whoever was steering didn't know how to catch it. The boat was unusual, narrow, long, with a high bow carved in the shape of a wave. A prayer boat. A distant memory prompted him. Such boats were used by the priestesses of the Deep Mother for pilgrimages, solo, silent, unarmed, without cargo, just the priestess and the ocean. He went down to the cove. Yun-sa was already there. She stood knee-deep in the water, watching the approaching boat, ears pricked, alert. Do Hwan stood beside her. Kang stood slightly behind him with a harpoon, a homemade one, a bamboo shaft with a burnt tip, not a weapon, a fishing tool. But in Kang's hands, it looked convincing. The boat approached the entrance to the cove. It stopped. The person sitting in it saw the narrow passage and froze. A woman, young, in white clothes wet with spray, long black hair, a shell necklace around her neck. A priestess. She raised her hands, palms up, a sign of peace, ancient, universal. Do Hwan nodded to Yun-sa. She dived in, emerged next to the boat, showed the priestess the passage between the stakes. The boat entered the cove. Its bow touched the sand. The priestess stepped out, stepped onto the black sand with bare feet, looked at Do Hwan, then at the house, at the oven, at the terraces on the slope, at the smoke from the smokehouse. Her eyes widened. She hadn't expected to see this on the ghost island. She said her name was Choi Rin, that she was the former voice of the temple on Songmok Island, that she had been exiled for refusing to declare the trade war sacred, that she was looking for a place for a quiet temple, a place where one could pray without politics. She spoke evenly, calmly, like someone who had long since grown tired of explaining. Do Hwan listened. He didn't interrupt. When she fell silent, he asked only one thing. Was she hungry? Choi Rin blinked, then she nodded. He led her to the house, sat her down, gave her a bowl of rice with fish and seaweed. She ate slowly, neatly. Even when hungry, she maintained her posture and ate as if at a palace table rather than on a bamboo bench. Tori peeked from around the corner. Yun-sa sat across from her, eyeing the priestess without hiding her suspicion. Kang stood by the door. Do Hwan sat nearby and waited. Ched-in finished eating. She set down the bowl, folded her hands, thanked them, and asked if she could stay for a few days. She needed rest. She needed water. She needed silence. Do Hwan replied that she could stay, not just for a few days, as long as she wanted. But he didn't have a temple. He had an island. Water, a roof, food. If she needed a temple, she could build it herself. He would help with the materials. Ched-in looked at him for a long time. There was something in her eyes that Do Hwan couldn't read. Exhaustion, distrust, and a tiny, almost invisible spark of something resembling hope. She nodded. He didn't build her a temple. He built her something better, a font. On the third day, Ched-in mentioned that the rituals of the Deep Mother required running water. Clean, at a certain temperature, warm as a mother's hands. That's what she said. Do Hwan heard her and said nothing. The next day he began digging. By the fifth day, the font was ready. A stone basin 3 paces wide, lined with fired bricks. Water was supplied from a hot spring he had found on the slope of the volcano a week ago. An extinct volcano, but the underground heat remained. Hot water flowed through bamboo pipes into the font. It mixed with cold water from the well. The temperature could be regulated with wooden dampers, more hot, less cold, or vice versa. The water is running. It comes in on one side, it goes out the other. It never stagnates. Choi Rin stood in front of the bath and was silent, for a long time. Hwan stood beside her and explained how it worked. This damper controls the hot water. This one controls the cold. The bottom isn't slippery. He deliberately fired the bricks to give them a rough surface. The drain is right here. The water flows into the ditch and irrigates the lower terrace. Nothing goes to waste. He talked and talked because she was silent, and it made him nervous. Then he stopped. Choi Rin crouched down. She dipped her hand into the water. Warm, clean, running. Just like the one at the temple in Songmok. How did he know? He didn't know. He just listened when she spoke, and built what she described. That was all he knew how to do. She looked up at him. Her eyes were wet. She said one word, "Thank you." Then she stood up and left, and no one saw her until evening. And in the evening she came out and said she was staying, not for a few days, for good, if he would allow it. Choi Rin changed the island, not through construction, through words. She knew how to speak so that people listened. 26 years, 10 of them as the voice of the temple. She formulated thoughts like a gem cutter shapes a stone, precisely, without excess, until Hwan noticed this and offered her to keep records. Not sacred texts, a ship's log, a real one, with numbers, how much rice was sown, how many fish were caught, how many bricks were fired, how much water was in the barrels, the names of the inhabitants, dates of arrival. She looked at him with an expression he had already learned to read. Are you serious? He was serious. They gave her a quill and soot ink, paper made from pressed bark, and she began to write. The first entry, an island with no name, population, 4 people and 1 piglet, supplies, 10 sacks of rice, 20 bundles of smoked fish, fresh water, unlimited, mana crystals, 8 pieces. She looked up after that line. She looked at Do Hwan. He nodded. Yes, 8. And there will be more. She said nothing, but her pen trembled slightly. By the end of the 4th month, 3 more people arrived on the island. Fishermen from a ravaged island. Admiral Chun Guanu's men had burned their village for failing to pay tribute. They had drifted for 3 days on a raft of logs. 2 men and a woman, thin, frightened. They saw smoke from the stove and pulled up to shore. Do Hwan took them in, fed them, showed them the island, gave them work. He sent the men to Kanu to fish, the woman to Yun Sa to gather seaweed, a room for each, a door with a bolt for each. Choi Rin entered their names in the logbook. The population, 7 people and 1 piglet. In the 4th month, the priestess Choi Rin, exiled from the temple for refusing to bless the war, sailed to the island. Do Hwan built her a ritual bath with running hot water for her ceremonies. She stayed and began keeping the island's logbook. 3 more refugees arrived from the island burned by Admiral Chun Guan-u. The population grew to 7 people. The 5th month, the island's population was 14. People arrived in groups of 2 or 3, fishermen, artisans, a family with 2 children, an old potter who had been cast out by his own son. All of them broken, all with stories that made you want to turn your back to the wall. Do Hwan didn't turn away. He fed them, he built rooms, he gave them work, and he didn't ask questions about the past. If you want to tell, tell. If you don't want to, don't. One thing matters here. Are you ready to work? The rest is between you and the ocean. The old potter turned out to be a true master. He looked at Do Hwan's crooked bowls and pursed his lips so that his mustache bristled. Then he sat down at the wheel and in an hour pulled 10 bowls. Smooth, thin-walled, with neat rims. Do Hwan stood nearby and felt like a freshman. The old man, whose name was Pei Seong, said the wheel was good, but that Do Hwan's hands weren't made for clay. It wasn't an insult, it was a fact. An engineer's hands and a potter's hands are different tools. Do Hwan handed over the entire pottery workshop to him. Pei Seong accepted it as a matter of course. A week later, the floor were pots, jugs, plates, bowls, and 3 vases of such beauty that Che Rin asked for one for a baptismal font. The rice terraces demanded attention. The 4th month of growth, stalks waist-high, ears of grain were beginning to form. Do Hwan checked the water every day, the level, temperature, turbidity. He drained the excess through bamboo sluices. Yun Sa helped weed, knee-deep in water. Tori scared away the birds with a homemade rattle. Every morning, 5 people worked on the terraces. That was good. It wasn't much, but it was enough. In the middle of the 5th month, a storm, a real one. Not like the downpour in the 2nd month, a full-blown tropical storm. The wind howled so hard that the bamboo walls shook. Waves crashed over the rocks of the cove. The sky turned black at noon. Do Hwan knew it was coming. 2 days before the storm, he noticed changes. The pressure had dropped. He knew this, not from a gauge, from Haeguk's behavior. The piglet had become restless. It was pacing around the pen, refusing to eat. A classic sign. Animals sense the pressure before humans do. Do Hwan gathered everyone, 14 people. He explained, "A big storm is coming, tomorrow or the day after. We need to prepare." They worked non-stop for 2 days. They secured everything that could blow away. They brought the tools inside. They moved their food supplies to a stone cave on the volcano's slope. They reinforced the roof with extra ropes. They lowered the terraces. They opened all the floodgates so the water wouldn't wash away the rice. They pulled Chodin's boat ashore and tied it to the rocks. Do Hwan built a makeshift barometer out of a bamboo tube and water. Primitive, but it worked. The water level was dropping. The pressure was dropping. The storm was approaching. It came at night. The wind hit like a wall. The roof held. The brick walls held. The bamboo outbuildings shook, but held. 14 people sat in the stone cave. Tori clung to Yunsa. The children were crying. Old Paesung was snoring because he had weathered 60 storms, and this one didn't impress him. Chorin sat at the cave entrance and quietly recited a prayer, not for the deep mother, for the people around her, so they might feel calmer. Kang stood next to Do Hwan at the entrance. They watched the wall of rain. Lightning tore through the sky. The ocean roared. The storm lasted 12 hours. In the morning, they went outside. The island had suffered. 2 stills were broken. The smokehouse had lost its roof. One wall of the annex had cracked. The bamboo water pipe was torn in 3 places. But the house stood. The oven stood. The terraces. Do Hwan ran to them. The rice lay there. The stalks were pinned to the ground by the wind, but the roots held. He picked up one stalk, alive, green, intact. He carefully straightened it out, set it upright, stuck a stick next to it for support, and began doing the same with the next stalk, and the next. Yunsa approached silently and began to help, then Kang, then everyone else. 14 people on their knees in the mud lifted the rice stalk by stalk. By noon, the terraces were green again. That evening, for the first time, someone called him Sir, one of the fishermen. He came up and said that Sir had saved their lives, that without the warning, they would have been left out in the open, that the stone cave and the stockpiled supplies had saved them. Do Hwan grimaced. He told them not to call him that. His name was Do Hwan, or just Hwan. The fisherman nodded, but in his eyes was that expression Do Hwan had seen before, in Yunsa, in Khan, in Chorin. Not fear, not submission, something else, something that made him feel uneasy, because he didn't consider himself a leader. He considered himself an engineer who builds things and feeds people. But to these people, it was one and the same. The 6th month, the first salt furnace. Do Hwan had been designing it for a week. Evaporating seawater in the sun yielded little. An industrial approach was needed. He built a furnace with wide, flat pans. Seawater was poured into the top one. A fire from below heated it and caused it to evaporate. The concentrated brine drained into the lower pan. There, it dried out. The salt crystallized, white, pure, coarse. He harvested his first crop of salt. 5 bowls. That was a lot. In a world where fresh water is more precious than silver, pure salt is worth almost as much. Because salt means preservation. Preservation means reserves. Reserves meant survival. So Ha-un would later tell him that his salt could have been sold for 3 times the market price. But So Ha-un was still a long way off. The rice ripened by the end of the 6th month. The ears were heavy, golden. They bent under their own weight. Do Hwan stood at the edge of the upper terrace and watched. 4 tiers of golden rice on a black volcanic slope. He had planted it 4 months ago, sprouts from seeds issued by the system. He grew them on the terraces he had carved out of the rock. He watered it with water he filtered through bamboo and charcoal. And there it stood, golden, alive, real. Yunsa approached and stood beside him. She looked at the rice, then at him. She said nothing, but her hand touched his, for a second, gently. The first touch she had initiated herself. He didn't flinch, didn't look, just stood there. And the wind swayed the golden ears of rice. The whole island harvested it, 14 people on 4 terraces. There were no sickles. They cut with knives, slowly, clumsily, but joyfully. Tori ran between the terraces, hauling bundles to the threshing area. Baesong grumbled that in his day, rice was harvested properly. Chorin took notes. The first harvest, 20 sacks of unhusked rice. For 14 people, that's 4 months' worth of food, if they were frugal. Do Hwan had no intention of saving. He planned to plant twice as much. The population had grown to 14. The old potter, Pei Sun, took over the pottery workshop. Rice grew on the terraces. A storm hit the island, but everyone survived thanks to Do Hwan's preparations. The rice survived. Do Hwan was called master for the first time, and he grimaced. A salt kiln was built. The first rice harvest was gathered, 20 sacks. The 7th month, a boat on the horizon, not a prayer boat, a warship, small but fast. With 2 gaff sails and a low deck, Tori lit a signal smoke and ran downstairs in 2 minutes. Do Hwan climbed up the cliff. The boat was heading straight for the cove, confidently, as if it knew where it was going. A figure stood at the bow, a woman, in dark clothing, with something long on her back, a sword. She didn't go into the cove. She rounded the rocks and moored at the southern shore, where there were no stakes, where there was no defense. She knew. or she guessed. Do Hwan went down to the southern shore. Kang followed him with a harpoon. Yun Sa went around by water and surfaced near the shore, ready. Che Rin stayed with the people. She organized them. The children into the cave, the women to the supplies, the men to the house. Everything as rehearsed after the storm. The woman pulled the boat onto the sand, alone. The boat was heavy, but she moved it without visible effort. She straightened up, turned toward Do Hwan. Young, 22, maybe 23. Her face was tanned, high cheekbones, short, ragged hair as if cut with a knife. Eyes gray and empty. Not dead, shut off. The eyes of a person who had stopped feeling so as not to break. A sword at her belt, long, in a worn scabbard with a faded crest. A clan scabbard, an ancestral one. She didn't draw the sword. She stood and watched. Do Hwan stopped 10 paces away. He asked who she was and why she had come. She answered briefly. Park Aru, a swordswoman of the Park clan. Former, banished. She needed water and a day's rest. Then she would leave. Do Hwan nodded. There was water. There was food. Let her follow him. She went. Kang walked behind her with a harpoon. Yun Sa walked alongside her through the water. Aru paid no attention to them, or pretended not to. He led her to the house, sat her down, gave her water, gave her rice and fish. She ate quickly, without manners, like a soldier, like someone who's used to having their food taken away at any moment. She finished eating, set down the bowl, looked at the island, at the house, at the terraces, at the stove, and said he needed protection. Do Hwan asked from whom. She said from everyone. He smirked and replied that he had underwater stakes and a bamboo harpoon, and that it worked. She looked at him as if he were a child. Stakes won't stop a man who comes on foot. A harpoon won't stop a swordsman. She was right, and he knew it. She told her story that evening, on her own, without questions. The Pak clan, a mountain clan of swordsmen from Choram Island, trained from the age of 5, a sword from 7, her first battle at 14. She was the best of her generation, fast, precise, ruthless, because that's how she was taught. Ruthlessness isn't cruelty, it's efficiency. That's what the teacher said. At 21, she was ordered to execute a child, 7 years old, a boy from an enemy clan, the last one, to cut off the line. She stood over him with her sword, looked into his eyes, and couldn't. She lowered the sword. She turned away. Another executed the boy. She was banished. Because a swordsman who cannot kill on command is no swordsman. It is a disgrace. She drifted for 6 months, from island to island, hiring herself out as a guard on ships. They took her because she was better with a sword than any man. They dismissed her because she was a woman with a sword. Eventually, she ended up here. Do Hwan listened. Then he was silent. Then he said one thing. He stood up and went into the house. He returned a minute later. In his hands was a scabbard, her scabbard, worn, with a faded crest. He noticed it was cracked in 2 places. The lacquer was peeling. The leather was cracked. He asked if he could repair it. Not the sword, the scabbard. Aro looked at the scabbard, then at him, for a long time. A sword is a weapon. A scabbard is a home for a weapon. To repair a scabbard is to honor not murder, but tradition. She held out the scabbard, silently. He worked all evening. He removed the old leather. He treated the wood with oil. He filled the cracks with resin and thin bamboo strips. He covered it with new leather from his supplies, not roughly, carefully, with the attention to detail that distinguished everything he did. Every stitch was even, every edge was smoothed. He didn't touch the Pak clan crest. He cleaned off the dirt. He touched up the outline, but he didn't erase it or replace it. It was her crest, her past. It wasn't for him to decide what to do with it. In the morning, he handed her the scabbard. Aru took it. She turned it over in her hands, ran her finger over the crest, over the seams, over the leather. She slid the sword in. It clicked softly into place. Perfect. She looked at Do Hwan. Her lips twitched. Not a smile, a hint of a possible smile. She said she would stay. Not for a day, for good, if they let her. He let her. Aru changed the island differently than Chedin. Chedin brought words and order. Aru brought discipline and safety. She walked the island in a day. She found all the weak spots, the southern shore, the western spit, the path through the bamboo grove. Anyone could land and reach the house in 10 minutes. She drew up a plan. Not a military one, a practical one. Stakes in the southern shallows, signal ropes in the grove, observation points. Not a fortress, an early warning system. Do Hwan agreed. Kang helped with the stakes. Yun-sa dived and set underwater barriers. Tori was assigned a second post, the southern shore. Morning on the eastern cliff, evening on the southern rock. The boy swelled with pride. Then a scene occurred that determined everything that followed. The end of the 7th month. A storm washed a wreck of a foreign ship onto the northern shore. 3 people on the wreck, half alive. Do Hwan saw them and went to them. Yun-sa and Aru followed him. He turned the first one over, a man, old, a tattoo on his face, a stranger's. Aru stopped nearby, petrified. A second man, a tattoo too. A third, a teenager. All 3 from a clan that had been at war with the Park clan, the very same clan whose child Aru had once refused to execute. She stood over them, her hand on her sword, her knuckles white, her whole body taut. Yun-sa looked at Do Hwan. She waited. He dropped to his knees. He checked their pulses. The old man is dead. The man is alive. The teenager is alive. He turned to Aru. She wasn't breathing. He said, "Aru, heat some water. They'll be staying with us tonight." She didn't move. He added, "This isn't an order. He's asking. If she says no, he'll carry them back to the water himself." Silence. Waves. Wind. Aru stood and looked at the teenager. Skinny, with traces of hunger on his face. The same age as that boy she couldn't bring herself to kill 3 years ago. She turned, walked toward the house to heat the water, and from that day on, she didn't leave Do Hwan's side for a moment, not as a guard, as a person who had finally realized that his weakness had become the law. The 8th month, a population of 23 people, the island had ceased to be a camp and had become a village. Houses stood in 2 rows along the path from the cove to the volcano, brick, with tile roofs, with bolted doors. Each house had a small plot for greenery, beans, roots, herbs for cooking. A well-trodden path ran between the houses. By the cove was a pier made of stone and bamboo, primitive but sturdy. 4 boats were moored there: the prayer boat, Choi-rin, the war boat, Aru, the fishing boat that Kang had pieced together from wreckage, and a new one, built by Do Hwan from scratch. The new boat was his pride and joy, small, 6 meters long, flat-bottomed, with a single mast. He had spent 3 weeks building it. The frame was made of bamboo. The planking came from boards he had sawed from tree trunks on the hillside. The cracks were caulked with resin and beeswax from the storehouse. The sail was made of sewn-together pieces of cloth. It wasn't beautiful. It was reliable. He launched it, and it didn't sink. That was the main thing. Yun-sa dove beneath it and checked the bottom. Dry, not a single leak. Do Hwan stood on the shore and watched his boat bobbing on the water of the bay. The island's first vessel, the first step from the island to the ocean. But a boat is not a ship. A real ship requires a shipyard. A shipyard requires a shipbuilder. Do Hwan had engineering knowledge. He understood the principles of buoyancy, hydrodynamics, and structural strength, but he had never built ships. He built filters, furnaces, and water pipes. A ship is a whole different level. He needed a specialist. The specialist came on his own. At the beginning of the 9th month, a merchant boat approached the pier, the first merchant boat ever. An old merchant was transporting planks and nails between the islands. He entered the bay by accident. He saw smoke and decided to check it out. He saw the settlement and froze. On a ghost island, brick houses, a stove, rice terraces, a pier. He stepped ashore and looked around like a man who had walked through the wrong door. Do Hwan welcomed him, fed him, showed him the island. The merchant touched the bricks and shook his head. He touched the roof tiles and clicked his tongue. He tasted the water from the well and widened his eyes. Fresh, clean, on a ghost island. He asked what the island's owner wanted. Do Hwan said he needed planks, good ones, for shipbuilding, and nails, and resin, and hemp for ropes. The merchant named a price. Do Hwan laid out 3 mana crystals. The merchant fell silent. Then he looked at the crystals, then at Do Hwan. Then he took the crystals and said that for that price he would bring planks and nails and resin and hemp, and also his niece, who builds boats better than any man in the archipelago. He wasn't joking. 2 weeks later, the merchant returned, with cargo and a girl. Han Mi-rae, 20 years old, the daughter of a ruined shipbuilder. The merchant explained. Her father owed him money for the planks. She was payment for the debt. That's it, simple. A person for some planks. Do Hwan looked at the merchant, then at the girl. She was standing on the pier with a wooden box in her hands. Tools in the box. Her tools. She held them the way Aru held her sword, like the last thing she had left. A pencil behind her ear, wood shavings in her hair. Her eyes were brown, stubborn, angry. Not at him, at the world that had sold her for planks. Do Hwan told the merchant he didn't believe in the debt, that he didn't accept a person as payment, that the girl was free. The merchant began to argue. Do Hwan took out 2 more crystals, placed them in front of him, said they were for the planks. The debt is settled, the girl is free. The merchant took the crystals and sailed away quickly before the strange island owner changed his mind. Han Mi-rae stood on the pier and looked at Do Hwan. He had just given her back her freedom. She didn't know what to do with herself. He approached her. He told her she could leave. On the merchant's boat, on any other boat, no one was holding her back. But if she wanted to stay, he had work for her. He needed a shipwright. He could see she had tools. He could see wood shavings in her hair. He knew what she was capable of. If she agreed, he would build her a shipyard, a real one, with a shed and a slipway and everything she needs. And the first ship she designs will bear her name on the keel, not his, hers. Mi-rae listened, a pencil behind her ear, wood shavings in her hair, lips pressed together, eyes wet, but she wasn't crying. She said one word, "Show me." He led her to the cove. For the next 2 weeks he built the shipyard, a shed made of bamboo and tiles, long, wide, big enough for a 12-meter ship, a slipway made of stone supports and wooden guides, a pit for bending planks with a steam press, racks for tools. Mi-rae was in charge. She told him where to place the supports, how high, and at what angle to guides. Do Hwan listened and obeyed. For the first time on this island, he was not the chief engineer but an assistant, and he liked it, because Mi-rae knew ships as well as he knew filters, from the inside, down to the details. By the smell of the wood and the angle of the plank's bend, she worked like a woman possessed, from dawn till dusk. She sketched on bamboo slats. She calculated in her head. She muttered about bulkheads and hull lines and draft. Do Hwan sat beside her and learned. He asked questions. She answered quickly and irritably, not because she was angry, because her thoughts raced faster than her words. Her father had said all her life that a woman couldn't build ships, that her hands were too weak, that her mind wasn't cut out for blueprints. She almost believed him. Almost. Do Hwan asked about the connection between the keel and the stem. She explained in a minute what would have taken him a week to figure out. He said she was the best naval engineer he'd ever met. She froze, looked at him, searching for a catch, a mockery, condescension. She didn't find any, because there wasn't any. He was stating a fact, like an engineer. By the end of the 9th month, the keel of the first real ship lay on the slipway. 12 meters, oak, smooth, sturdy. Mi-rae ran her hand over the wood and smiled, the first smile Do Hwan had seen on her face. Small, crooked, but genuine. The ship isn't built yet, but the keel is in place, and everything starts with the keel. She said she needed 4 months, and more people, carpenters, caulkers, a blacksmith for fittings. A blacksmith? Do Hwan had been thinking about this for a long time. He needed a smithy, not for swords, for nails and hinges and staples and tools. The system dispensed cast iron and iron in small portions. He saved them up. By the 8th month, he had enough metal to get started, but he didn't know how to forge, not at all. He knew the theory, melting points, properties of alloys, principles of hardening, but between theory and the hammer lies a distance of 1,000 blows. There were no blacksmiths among the residents. He would have to learn on his own. He built a smithy next to the furnace for firing, a stone forge, bellows made of leather and bamboo, an anvil made of heavy volcanic rock, flat, hard, not ideal, but it would do for a start, a stone hammer with a wooden handle, tongs. His first attempt at forging ended with a burn on his left hand and a piece of iron that looked more like a lump of mud than a nail. Second attempt, third. By the 10th, he had forged his first nail, crooked, but a nail. Mi-rae looked at him and said that 400 of those were needed for the ship. Do Hwan looked at his burned hands and nodded. The population had grown to 23. Do Hwan built the first boat. A merchant arrived and brought Han Mi-rae, the shipbuilder's daughter, who had been given away to settle a debt. Do Hwan freed her and offered her a job. She stayed and became the chief ship engineer. They built a shipyard and laid the keel of the first real ship. Do Hwan built a smithy and began to learn how to forge. The 10th month. Trade came to the island, not because Do Hwan had called for it, because the old merchant had told others. A ghost island in the northeast, brick houses, clean water, rice, salt, and a master who pays for planks with mana crystals. Rumors in the archipelago traveled faster than ships. By the 10th month, 2 or 3 boats were coming to the dock each week. Small traders, fishermen from neighboring islands, the curious. They brought what was missing: fabrics, leather, iron, vegetable seeds. They took away salt and smoked fish and Pei Sun's clay pottery. And every time they left with the look of someone who had seen something that couldn't be. So Ha-un arrived on one of those trading boats, not as a refugee, as a merchant, 23 years old, a cold smile, perfect braids arranged so that not a single hair stuck out, simple but clean clothes, hands without calluses, the hands of a person who counts, not builds. She stepped onto the island, looked around, asked for a meeting with the owner. Do Hwan was sitting by the forge, trying to hammer out the 20th nail. His hands were covered in soot. His face was smudged with soot. His shirt was scorched in 3 places. So Ha-un looked at him and mistook him for a blacksmith. She asked where the owner was. He said he was the owner. She looked again, at the soot, at the scorched shirt, at the nail in his hand. She shifted her gaze to the houses, to the terraces, to the shipyard, where the skeleton of a ship was visible, back to him. She didn't believe it, but she continued. She said she wanted to trade. She has connections. She has knowledge of the markets. She has experience running a trading house. She needs a base. The island is suitable. Do Hwan asked why she was here and not at her trading house. Her face didn't change. Her voice didn't waver. She said her partner had stolen everything. The house, the goods, the ships, the money. He pinned the debts on her. She was left with nothing. Creditors are looking for her on 3 islands. She fled. She sailed here because this is the edge of the map. Beyond lies only the empty ocean. She isn't asking for mercy. She's proposing a deal. Her brains for his roof. Do Hwan listened. Then he offered her rice. She refused. She wanted an answer. He smirked. Fine. He took her around the island, showed her everything. Warehouses, supplies, furnaces, salt, rice, mana crystals. She was calculating in her head as they went. He saw her eyes darting about, assessing, weighing, recalculating. When they returned to the house, she said that his salt was worth 3 times more than he thought, that his rice could be sold as seed rice at the price of gold, that his earthenware was crude, but on fishless islands people would pay any price for it, that he was sitting on a fortune and didn't see it because he was an engineer, not a merchant. Do Hwan nodded. That was exactly why he needed a merchant, her. If she agreed, he would grant her full authority, all trade operations, all contracts, all warehouses, complete control over the island's market. She looked at him, searching for a catch. Her previous partner had given her authority too, and then he stole everything and blamed her. Do Hwan understood that. He removed the cord from his neck on which the warehouse seal hung, carved from stone, his personal one, the only one. He held it out to her. He said, "Here's the seal. If you want to leave and take everything, take it." He trusts her. She stood there with the seal in her hand and said nothing. For a long time. Then she clenched her fingers. She nodded. And for the first time during the entire conversation, her cold smile grew slightly warmer. So Ha-in transformed the island in a month. She brought order to the warehouses. She sorted the goods. She set the prices. She compiled a price list on bamboo tablets and hung them at the pier. Every merchant coming into the bay could see what was available and how much it cost. No haggling, no cheating. Fixed prices, honest weights. Cho-rin recorded every transaction in a ledger. So Ha-un checked the figures. A silent respect developed between them. 2 women who knew how to work with words and numbers and valued that in each other. Trade was growing. By the 11th month, 5 or 6 boats arrived on the island each week. Salt, rice, tableware, smoked fish, clean water in barrels. Goods that were worth more than silver in this world. So Ha-un turned the island into a trading hub. Small, but reliable. Because there was no cheating here. Word spread. There is an island. They weigh things honestly there. They don't overcharge there. You can drink water straight from the well there. People came to trade. Some stayed. The population, by the 11th month, 37 people, fishermen, artisans, 2 families with children, a former clerk, a former doctor, a home for everyone, a job for everyone, a door with a bolt for everyone. Do Hwan built without stopping. His hands were calloused, his back ached every evening, but he didn't stop, because every new house meant one more person who would no longer wake up in fear. Mireille worked on the ship. The frames were up, the planking was going on. The ship grew on the slipway like a living creature, 12 meters long, wide, stable, with a deep hold for cargo, a merchant ship, not a warship, until Huang forged nails every evening, 20 at a time. His hands had grown accustomed to the hammer. The burns had healed and were covered with new burns, and then healed again. By the end of the 11th month, 300 of the 400 nails were ready. Mireille said that was enough. She had counted them and determined 320 were needed. He had the remaining ones in 2 days. The 12th month, a year on the island. Do Hwan stood on the eastern cliff and looked out at the ocean. A year ago, he had been thrown from the ship into this ocean, with his hands tied, in a torn shirt. Now, behind him, a village of 20 houses, rice terraces, a shipyard, a blacksmith shop, a saltworks, a smokehouse, a pier, 37 people, in a ship that will be launched tomorrow. The ship's launch had brought the whole island together. Mireille stood on the slipway and checked the final fastenings. Her face was serious. Her hands were trembling. Not from fear, from excitement. This is her first ship, built from keel to stern, with her own hands, according to her blueprints. Do Hwan approached and stood beside her. She looked at him. He nodded. It was time. Kang and 4 men knocked out the supports. The ship swayed. It slid along the guides, slowly, heavily. The wood creaked, the rails groaned. The bow entered the water, the stern lifted, and it slid out. A splash, a wave, a rocking. The ship stood on the water, steady, confident. It didn't list, it didn't leak. Yunsa dove down and checked the bottom. She surfaced with a thumbs up, dry. The island erupted in a shout. The children squealed. Baesong clapped his hands. Cherin smiled. Aru stood with her sword at her feet, and the expression on her face could have been mistaken for stone, if not for the corners of her lips, which were slightly turned up. Do Hwan turned to Mireille. He took out a tool, a chisel. He walked to the stern. There, on the keel, a smooth spot had been left. He handed the chisel to her. She looked. She understood. She took the chisel and carved her name on the keel, Han Mireille, deeply, clearly, forever. When she finished, she stood there looking at the letters, her shoulders shaking, a pencil behind her ear, wood shavings in her hair, tears on her cheeks. Her father used to say that a woman couldn't build ships. Here was her ship, floating on the water, with her name on the keel. A flag was raised on the mast. Do Hwan designed it a month ago, a circle and 3 drops of water. The circle is an island. The 3 drops are the 3 things valued here: water, honesty, work. A simple symbol, white on blue. The wind caught it and unfurled it, visible from anywhere in the bay. The maiden voyage. Do Hwan didn't sail. He sent Kana as captain, Yunsa as navigator. She knew the underwater currents better than any map. Together with Haun, she mapped out the route and made a list of goods. Salt, rice, tableware, smoked fish, clean water in barrels. 12 days there and back. 3 islands. Do Hwan stood on the pier and watched as his ship sailed out of the bay. His ship, with the name Mireille on the keel, with a flag on the mast, with people he trusted on board. Aru stood nearby, silent, hand on her sword. She was worried. So was he, but he didn't show it. 12 days, the longest of his life on the island. He built, expanded the smithy. He laid the foundation for a second kiln. He designed a watermill for threshing rice. He worked from morning till night to keep his mind off things. Mireille couldn't sit still either. She laid the keel for a second ship, a smaller one, for a fast reconnaissance vessel. Cherin kept a log and pretended to be calm. Tori sat on the cliff from dawn to dusk. On the 13th day, Tori ran up. A sail, with a flag. Their flag. A circle and 3 drops. The island spilled onto the shore. The ship entered the bay. Heavy, low. The hold was full. Kang stood at the bow and waved his hand. silently, as always, but his eyes were smiling. Yunsa jumped from the deck into the water and swam toward the pier. She surfaced in front of Do Hwan, wet, radiant. Her ears stood straight up. She said everything had been sold, everything. The salt went first, the rice second. 3 merchants haggled over Paison's tableware. They brought back fabrics, iron, tools, seeds, and 3 people who asked for refuge. They had heard of an island where rice was weighed fairly and wanted to live there. 40 people. Do Hwan sat by the fire that evening and counted. 40. A year ago, 0. 40 people who live and work and eat 3 times a day and sleep behind bolted doors. 40 people for whom this island has become home. He looked at Yunsa. She was sleeping by the fire, curled up in a ball. Her ears twitched in her sleep. Next to her, Tori was snuggled up against her side. Che-rin was writing in her journal by candlelight. Aru was sitting at the entrance, sharpening her sword. Mireille was drawing on a plank. So-ha-un was checking the accounts. His team, his people, his island. And that was exactly when the letter arrived. Tori found it in the morning, at the pier, tied to a rock. No one saw who left it. No one heard a boat at night. An envelope made of fine paper, sealed with wax. Do Hwan opened it. Inside was a single sheet. The text was written in Korean, modern Korean, not the local language, Korean from his world, from a past life. The font was even, the handwriting neat. The text was short. Brother, I know you're here. I'm building too. Only the right way. Surrender or die with dignity. No signature. No return address. Do Hwan read and reread it. His fingers didn't tremble, but something inside, something tightened, cold, heavy. Another lost soul, another system, only a different path. The path of the sword, the path of strength, the path of fear. He folded the letter, put it in his pocket, didn't show it to anyone. Not yet. A year and 2 months. Do Hwan showed the letter to his own, gathered all 6 of them. Yunsa, Choi-rin, Aru, Mireille, So-ha-un, and Kana, who didn't speak but listened better than anyone. He placed the letter on the table. They took turns reading it. Choi-rin translated the text from Korean into the local language for those who didn't understand. Silence. A long one. Aru placed her hand on her sword. Yunsa pressed her ears. Mireille picked up a pencil and began twirling it between her fingers. So Ha-un looked up from the letter and asked what he knew. Do Hwan told them everything about the system, about the Paradise Warehouse, about how he earned points and rewards, about how the system only worked on his land, about the limitations. He hadn't told them before, not because he didn't trust them, because he didn't know how to explain it. Now he explained. They listened in silence. Yunsa asked, so the pebbles she used to make the weights were from the system? He nodded. She snorted. Mireille asked, so the bamboo and tools from the early days were also from the system? He nodded. She shrugged. The tools are good. She didn't care where they came from. Che-rin asked one thing. So the other guy has a system like that too? He nodded. Only the other guy chose weapons. Aru said she needed to know. How many people does he have? What kind of ships? What kind of weapons? She was a military man, and she thought in military terms. Do Hwan said he knew nothing, only the letter. So Ha-in said she would find out. She had business contacts. Rumors were circulating. If someone in the archipelago is building an army instead of a market, people talk about it. She'll find out. A month later, So-ha-un found it, the southern archipelago, Hagyeong Island. 2 years ago, it was a fishing village. Now, it's a fortress. A fleet of 20 warships, an army of mercenaries. The leader is known as the Black Master. No one knows his real name. He appeared out of nowhere 2 years ago, just like Do Hwan. He builds weapons never before seen in the archipelago. Crossbows with mechanical cocks, incendiary projectiles, ships with iron plating. They fear him. They pay him. 3 islands are already under his control. He doesn't trade. He takes. Do Hwan listened and understood. Another time traveler had chosen the path of force, a path that seemed obvious. You have knowledge from the future. You have a system that provides resources. Why not build an army? Why not conquer? It's logical. It's effective. And that was exactly what Do Hwan didn't want, because he saw where it led. The Hyun Marine Empire started that way too. One man, one system, one army. And 60 years later, it crumbled. Because fear isn't inherited. A sword does not build. A sword only cuts. But before thinking about the Black Master, he had to deal with the one closer at hand, Admiral Chun Guan-u. His scouts had already come. Twice. The first time disguised as merchants, so Haun figured them out in half a day. Hands too clean. Too many questions about fortifications. The second time, a fisherman sat in the rocks on the southern shore for 3 days. Aru found his tracks. Do Hwan understood. The Admiral is gathering information. He'll come later. A year and 4 months. The Admiral sent an embassy, an official one. 3 ships, a white flag, 20 men in ceremonial armor, an ambassador in silk robes. They entered the bay through the passage that Yusa had shown them. Do Hwan received them at the pier, in simple work clothes, with soot on his hands. Aru stood behind his right shoulder, sword in its sheath. Yun-sa to his left, wet from her morning dive. The ambassador spoke eloquently. Admiral Chun Guan-u, ruler of the northeastern sector, offers friendship and protection. In exchange for a monthly tribute, rice, salt, mana crystals, and recognition of the Admiral as the island's supreme protector. The standard scheme. Pay up, or it'll hurt. Do Hwan listened. Then he gave the embassy a tour of the island, showed them the houses, the terraces, the shipyard, the market, the smithy, the school that Chodin had opened for the children, the infirmary where the former physician worked. He fed them lunch, the best the kitchen could prepare. Rice, fish, vegetables, fresh bread made from flour they had begun grinding at the watermill. The ambassador ate and said nothing. He looked around, he assessed, he evaluated. Do Hwan let them go alive. Without an answer, he said he would think it over. The ambassador sailed away, so Hyen said there would be an assault in 2 weeks. Aru agreed. The Admiral doesn't know how to wait. He saw that the island was rich. He saw that there were no walls. He'll decide that taking it is easier than negotiating. Do Hwan nodded. He knew this even before the embassy arrived. That's why he began preparing a month before their arrival. Underwater chains. The idea came to him at night. Not stakes. Stakes break. Chains. Heavy ones. Iron. Stretched across the bottom of the bay from rock to rock. Normally, they lie on the seabed. On command, they rise. Winches on the shore. Bamboo drums with leather ropes. Yun-sa and her divers laid the chains for 6 months. Do Hwan forged every link. Every evening. 3 links. 4. 5. His hands burned. His back wouldn't straighten. But the chain grew. And now it lay on the seabed, waiting. Do Hwan told his people about the system and the other stranger. So Haun found out that the Black Master controls 3 islands in the south and was building an army. Admiral Chun Guan-u sent an embassy demanding tribute. Do Hwan showed them the island and let them go. He began preparing defenses. The underwater chains in the bay had been forged for 6 months and were ready. A year and 6 months. Do Hwan stood on the roof of the lighthouse and looked at the horizon through a tube. He had assembled the tube himself. 2 polished glass discs from the system. A bamboo frame. The lenses were a bit warped, but the magnification was 4 times. Enough to see the sails before the sails see you. The horizon was clear. It had been clear for 3 weeks. So Hyen said that was a bad sign. When the traders stop coming, it means someone has warned them. It means someone is clearing the routes. It means it's coming soon. He went down. He walked through the village. 52 people. Houses in 3 rows. A paved path from the pier to the volcano. The watermill clattered steadily. The wheel turned under the pressure of water from a bamboo aqueduct. The millstones ground rice into flour. A bakery nearby, small, stone, with a clay oven. Bread had appeared on this island 4 months ago and had since become the main currency in the dining hall. The children fought over the crust. Pei Song grumbled that in his day they ate rice, not this Western fad, but he was the first to grab the crust. Do Hwan stopped by to see Eru. She was at the training ground. 12 teenagers stood in a row with wooden swords. Eru walked in front of them, silent, upright, correcting their posture with a touch of her finger, not with her voice, with her finger. Here, the knee is lower. Here, the elbow is in. Here, the chin is up. The teenagers stretched. They adored her. They weren't afraid. They adored her. Because she was strict but never hit them, never humiliated them. She only corrected them. And when one of them made a move correctly, she nodded, once, briefly, and that nod was worth more than 10 compliments. Until Hwan called her back. He said the merchants wouldn't be coming for 3 weeks. She nodded. She knew. She said the fortifications were ready. The southern shore, the western spit. The underwater stakes have been replaced. The signaling system has been checked. Tori is on duty. A second lookout named Sok is on the southern cliff. A two-man night watch with a lantern at the lighthouse. She had done everything she could. But 12 teenagers with wooden swords and 4 fishermen with harpoons were no army. Against a fleet, they were nothing. Do Hwan said he didn't need an army. He needed time. She looked at him and said nothing. She had learned to trust his plan even when she didn't understand it. He went to Yun Sa. She was in the water, as always. She had dived in that morning and hadn't come up. 4 young Neko Ama were working with her. They had arrived over the past few months, skinny, timid, with brands on their shoulders. Yun Sa was teaching them how to work with the chains. Each knew her section. Each knew her stopper. Each could open it underwater in 5 seconds. They trained every day. Yun Sa pushed them hard, not cruelly, hard, because the life of the entire island depended on their speed. She surfaced when she saw Do Hwan, wet, ears sticking out. He asked if the chains were ready. She said the chains had been ready for a month, that every link had been checked, that the latches were oiled, that the winches on the shore were working. She paused. Then she added that she was scared. It was the first time she'd said that word in front of him, scared. He nodded. He was scared too, but he didn't say it out loud. Instead, he said that tonight there would be grilled fish with rice and vegetables, and that Besong had made new plates. Yun Sa snorted, dived back in, but her ears twitched. He went to see Mide. The shipyard was bustling. The second ship on the slipway was almost ready. The planking was finished. The deck was laid. The mast was in place. Mide was standing on the deck, checking the rigging, a pencil behind her ear, wood shavings in her hair, her hands covered in tar. She looked up when he climbed the ladder. He asked if the ship could be launched early. She said the caulking on the port side wasn't finished, 2 days' work. He said they might not have 2 days. She looked at him. She understood. She didn't ask anything. She turned to the apprentices and said, "We'll work through the night." They nodded. Mire didn't explain why. They trusted her, just as she trusted Do Hwan. So Haun waited for him at the warehouse, a cold smile, perfect braids, abacus in her hands. She said she'd calculated their supplies. If the blockade lasts a month, they'll have enough food. 2 months if they cut back on portions. The rice on the terraces is ripening, harvest in 6 weeks, if they make it that long. There's always fish in the bay, seaweed. The well is working. There is salt. They won't starve to death, but trade will grind to a halt, and those who are used to receiving their goods will start asking questions. This can be used to our advantage. She had already sent letters to the 3 trading houses she worked with. If the Admiral blocks the island, these trading houses will lose money. If they lose money, they will put pressure on the Admiral. Not out of love for Namdo, out of love for profit. Money is a weapon too. Do Hwan smiled. For the first time, So Haun smiled back. It's not cold. She's tired. He went to see Cherin. She was sitting in her room by candlelight. The 4th volume of the journal lay open, a quill in her hand, ink on her fingers. She was writing the island's history, not a chronicle, history, with names and dates and details. Who arrived when, who built what, who was born, who died. 2 people had died on the island in 2 years, an old fisherman from a fever, and a child who couldn't be saved from the storm. Their names were in the journal, forever. Chorin looked up. She asked if she needed the scroll, the treaty. She had drafted 3 versions, a peaceful one, a trade one, and an ultimatum. Do Hwan said he wanted the peaceful one. She nodded. She took out the scroll, blank parchment, ink, and she began to write in that smooth, beautiful handwriting that made people listen even before she opened her mouth. Emily found him at the pier that evening, red-haired, tanned, with a notebook under her arm. She spoke the local language almost fluently, though her accent made her speech sound like a bird's chirp. She said she had finished the map of the northeastern sector, the whole thing, with depths and currents and reefs and safe routes. She showed it to him. Hwan unfolded the map. The work was flawless. The lines were thin and precise. Depths were marked with numbers, currents with arrows. Every island was labeled, every reef was marked. Emily asked why 40 times a day, but that was exactly why her maps were the best in the archipelago. She didn't draw what she saw, she drew what she understood. Do Hwan rolled up the map, said it would save lives. Emily shrugged, said that was why she made them. Then she paused and asked, "There's going to be a fight." He shook his head. Not a fight, a conversation, just a loud one. Tori ran up at dawn, white, out of breath. Sails, black with red, lots of them, the entire eastern horizon. Do Hwan was ready. He stood up, put on a clean shirt, went outside. The island already knew. Signal smoke rose from the southern cliff. Sock saw them at the same time as Tori. People were coming out of their houses, silently, without panic. They knew what to do. 3 months of preparation. Everyone knew their place. The children to the stone cave with the women, the men to the pier, Aru to the bay wall, Yun Sa into the water, Mi Ray to the signal fires, Cho Rin to the megaphone, So Ha In to the warehouse. 28 ships. Do Hwan counted from the lighthouse through his binoculars. 28. The entire fleet of the northeastern sector. Chung Guan didn't skimp. He brought everything he had. The horseshoe encircled the bay from east to west. The ships moved slowly, confidently, with the dignity of a man who knows he has power. The Admiral stood on the flagship, in black armor, with a megaphone in his hand. Do Hwan came down from the lighthouse. He walked through the village. People watched him, silently. Not with fear, with something else, with anticipation. He nodded to everyone, calmly, as if he were heading not to battle, but to breakfast. He stepped out onto the pier, a long stone tongue jutting into the bay. He stood at the end. The wind ruffled his shirt. Yun Sa was already in the water. He saw her shadow flicker beneath the surface. Aru stood behind his right shoulder, sword in hand, blade pointed at the ground. Her face was stony. Mi Ray was lighting the lanterns on the mast, white ones, one after another, 4 white lights, a signal of peaceful intentions. Che Rin stood by the megaphone, a scroll in her hand, calm, steady, as if she were about to read the morning prayer rather than stop 28 ships. So Ha-un stood slightly behind her, hands clasped, her face inscrutable. Emily sat on a rock and drew, a notebook open on her lap. A pencil flew across the paper. The residents came out onto the walls of the bay, fishermen, potters, a baker, a miller, a healer, women with children, Pei Xiong with a pipe, Tori with a clay whistle, Kang with a harpoon, silent as always, but his eyes said enough. No one hid, no one ran, because there was nowhere to run, and because over the past 2 years, this island had become theirs, their homes, their rice, their doors, their children's cries in the mornings, their warm bread from the bakery, their well with clean water. It was impossible to run from this. The Admiral's flagship approached the entrance to the bay. Chon Guan-u raised his megaphone. His voice carried over the water, heavy and steady. He wasn't shouting. He wasn't threatening. He was giving orders, like a man accustomed to being obeyed. Surrender. Open the bay. Accept the garrison. Pay tribute. Or he would enter by force and take everything, and he would show no mercy. Standard words, he had spoken them dozens of times, on dozens of islands, and dozens of islands had obeyed. Do Hwan raised his hand, 1 finger, a gesture, 1 minute. The Admiral fell silent, perhaps out of surprise, perhaps out of curiosity. The man in the canvas shirt at the end of the pier raised a finger before 28 warships and asked for a minute. The bay fell silent. Do Hwan turned toward the water. He nodded, briefly. Yun Sa saw it. She dove deeper. She signaled. Underwater, 4 divers simultaneously released the latches. The winches on the shore creaked, the cables tightened, and the chains began to rise. Slowly, heavily, the iron hummed. The water boiled with white foam. Link by link, the chains rose from the depths, across the entrance to the bay, across the exit beyond the rocks, and between the ships. Yun Sa and her divers had been laying this net for 6 months. Every link was forged by Do Hwan's hands. Every stopper was set by Yun Sa's hands. Every point was verified against Emily's map. The chains rose. They tightened. They hummed like the strings of a giant harp. 28 ships froze. Instantly, Like flies in a spider web, the chains entwined their hulls. They didn't pierce them. They didn't sink them. They immobilized them. The sails flapped uselessly. Oars scraped the water, but the hulls stood still. Neither forward nor backward. Not a single ship could move. Sailors screamed. They leaned over the sides. They looked down at the iron beneath the keels. They hacked at the water with cutlasses. The chains wouldn't yield. They were too heavy and too deep to be cut through from the deck. To remove the chain, one had to dive. And the Admiral's divers were sitting on the Admiral's ships, not underwater. Admiral Chon stood on the flagship and watched. He didn't move. His face remained unchanged, but the knuckles of the hands holding the megaphone had turned white. In 20 years of his naval career, he had been stopped by storms, reefs, other fleets, but chains at the bottom of a peaceful bay. This was new. This was insulting, and it was working. Mireille lit the last signal fire. 4 white ones, peaceful. They burned evenly and brightly against the backdrop of the dawn sky, reflected in the water. White light, not red, not war, peace. Choi Rin approached the megaphone. She unrolled the scroll, smoothed it out, raised her head, and began to read. Her voice carried over the water, steady and calm. A voice that had spoken on behalf of the temple for 10 years. A voice that thousands had heard. A voice that now spoke on behalf of the island. She read the terms. A trade agreement, drafted by So Ha-in, reviewed by Do Hwan, written by Cho Rin's own hand. Equal parties, equal terms, rice at a fair price, salt at a fair price, clean water for ships, shipyard repairs, pilotage services, route charts, no tribute, no subjugation, no garrisons, trade, only trade. Each clause sounded not like a demand, like an invitation, because Cho Rin knew how to speak so that even the terms sounded like a gift. Do Hwan spoke, quietly. The bay was silent. 28 ships were silent. 52 men on the walls were silent. Even the wind had died down, and his voice reached the flagship without a megaphone. He said he hadn't killed a single sailor. He could have. He knew how. The chains could have been spiked. The underwater stakes could have been longer. A flammable mixture on the water could have turned the bay into a furnace. He knew how to do all of that. He is an engineer. He knows how to do many things. But he doesn't want the first thing they learn about Namdo in the ocean to be the smell of burning wood and the screams of drowning people. He made a proposal. Turn back. Take your ships. In a month, send a merchant. Not a soldier, a merchant. And he'll sell him rice at a fair price. And the merchant will return home and tell everyone there's a place. At the edge of the map, where the weak aren't drowned, where they weigh things fairly, where the lighthouse shines for everyone. Chong Guan-u stood at the bow of the flagship, his megaphone lowered, hands at his sides. He looked at the pier, at the man in the shirt, at the sword with its blade in the ground, at the white lights, at the people on the walls, at the old man with a pipe, at the boy with a clay whistle, at the flag, a circle and 3 drops. The Admiral had lived by a single rule for 47 years. The ocean feeds the strong, it drowns the weak. This island broke the rule, not by force, by something else, something the Admiral could not name, chains that did not kill, white lights instead of red, a treaty instead of an ultimatum, rice instead of blood. He stood there for a long time, a very long time. The bay waited, the ocean waited. Every person on the walls held their breath. Yun Sa hung underwater by the stopper, ready to raise the second line of chains if the Admiral tried to break through. Eru gripped the hilt of her sword. Mireille held a torch by the oil reservoir, just in case. So Ha-un counted the seconds. Choi Rin held the scroll and held her breath. Emily was drawing. Even now, the pencil didn't stop. The Admiral raised his hand. Not the megaphone, his hand. And he gave a signal. Turn. The silence exploded. Not with a scream, with an exhalation. 52 people exhaled simultaneously. On the Admiral's ships, anchor chains clattered, sails were hauled in, rudders were turned. Do Hwan nodded. Yun Sa and the divers lowered the chains. The winches slackened. The iron sank to the bottom. The way was clear. 28 ships turned slowly and laboriously in the narrow space. One by one, they left the bay. Black sails with a red stripe receded toward the horizon. Not a single shot fired. Not a single cry. Not a single drop of blood. When the last ship became a dot, Tori raised his whistle. He blew it. Quietly. Out of tune. Happily. A clay whistle made by Pei Sun's own hands. A thin sound like a bird's cry. and the whole island exhaled once more. Someone sat down on the ground. Someone cried. Pei Sun tapped the pipe against a rock and reloaded it. His hands were shaking, but he didn't let it show. Kang set down his harpoon and sat down, silently, as always. But his shoulders slumped for the first time in 3 hours. Do Hwan turned around, 6 pairs of eyes. Yoon Sa emerged at the pier, wet, glowing, ears perked up, eyes yellow and brighter than ever. Choi Rin rolled up the scroll, pressed it to her chest, closed her eyes. Aru sheathed her sword, that very one, repaired by his own hands. A quiet click. Mireille extinguished the torch. Her hands were covered in tar, a pencil tucked behind her ear. So Ha-eun lowered her hands. Her cold smile turned warm. Emily closed her notebook. She looked at him. She smiled. The wind ruffled her red hair. Do Hwan looked at them. He asked hoarsely, "Who wants breakfast?" "He's dying himself." Yoon Sa snorted and splashed water in his face. Aru took her hand off the scabbard. Mireille turned toward the shipyard, because the caulking on the port side won't wait. So Ha-eun went to the storeroom. Taking inventory after a siege is sacred. Choi Rin opened her journal. She sat down on a rock. She dipped her pen and wrote. Admiral Jeon Gwan-oo's 28 ships entered Namdo Bay. 28 ships left without a fight. Casualties, 0. Emily peered over her shoulder. She read it. She nodded. That evening, Do Hwan sat in his study, a small room, a desk, a chair, a candle. On the desk was a letter from his brother. He took it out of the drawer, unfolded it, reread it. "Brother, I know you're here. Surrender or die with dignity." He looked at the letters. Korean, from a past life, from a world where he died asleep at the wheel. Somewhere in the south, a man with the same mindset was building an army, forging swords instead of chains, building walls instead of lighthouses. He chose the path of force because the path of force is obvious, because it's easier that way. Do Hwan held the letter up to the candle. The paper darkened. It flared up. He hadn't finished reading it the first time, and he didn't finish reading it now. Ashes fell onto the table. He brushed them away with his palm. He stood up. He walked out. On the harbor's mast, the wind unfurled the flag, a circle and 3 drops of water, white on blue. It's visible from the open ocean. And somewhere far to the south, a man with a set of swords gazed at the horizon and thought about how to break what cannot be broken by a sword. The first arch was finished, but Do Hwan didn't know that. He only knew that tomorrow he had to repair the 3rd terrace, and forge hinges for the new doors, and check the chains, and feed Haiguk, who in 2 years had grown into a huge black boar and still bit his fingers. Admiral Jeon Gwan-oo's 28 ships came to storm the island. Do Hwan had prepared the island in advance. The chains, which had been forged for 6 months, rose from the seabed and immobilized the entire fleet without a single shot being fired. Choi Rin read the trade agreement. Do Hwan offered the admiral trade instead of war. The admiral turned and left. 0 casualties. Do Hwan burned a letter from another time traveler. The Namdo flag fluttered in the wind. 2 years. Mornings on Namdo Island began the same way. The clang of hammers at the shipyard, the creak of the watermill, the crow of the rooster, which the system had designated as the milestone for 60 residents, the lapping of water in the bay. The voice of Aru counting the strikes of wooden swords on the training ground. The voice of Basin grumbling at a student who had shaped a pot crookedly. The voice of Tori demanding to know from whom to return his whistle. The smell of bread from the bakery. The smell of fish from the smokehouse. The smell of tar from the shipyard. The island was waking up and sounded and smelled like a place where people live. Not just survive. Live. 112 people. Do Hwan knew each one by name. Ched-in had recorded everyone in a logbook, so Ha-eun knew what each person was doing and how much they ate. 12 ships in the bay. 7 built by Mireille. 3 were purchased. 2 were seized from pirates who tried to rob a trade caravan and discovered that the Namdo caravan was guarded. Aru personally boarded the pirate ship, alone, with a sword. She returned 3 minutes later. The pirates surrendered. because she didn't kill anyone but simply showed what she was capable of. And that was enough. The 8-tiered rice terraces yielded 4 harvests a year. The tropical climate allowed for it. The bamboo irrigation system worked without a hitch. There was enough grain for the island and for trade. The salt kiln produced so much salt that So Ha-un exported it to 6 islands. The smithy operated around the clock. Until Do Hwan found an apprentice. A young man named Chong He, 18 years old, a former slave from the quarry. Hands like a bear's, patience like a rock's. He forged nails straighter than Do Hwan and wasn't shy about it. Do Hwan was glad, because his smithy had outgrown a single person. The shipyard operated on 2 slipways. Mire had recruited 8 apprentices and branded each one's name on the first frame they had shaped correctly. A tradition she had invented herself, because someone had once branded her name on the keel and it had changed her life. Every Namdo ship bore the builder's name, not the owner's, the builder's. That was the difference. A small one, but in a world where people were bought for the price of planks, the difference was like an abyss. Choyedin's school had grown, 23 children. She taught them to read, write, and count. Not prayers, numbers, letters, names. Because a person who can write their own name is harder to turn into a slave. That's what she told Do Hwan one evening. He nodded. He knew that. But hearing it from a priestess who had spoken other people's words for 10 years was different. It mattered. Admiral Chun Kwan-oo sent a merchant, a month after the retreat, just as Do Hwan had promised. The merchant arrived with guards and a wary expression. He left alone, without guards. The guards asked to stay, not because they were ordered to, because on the island there was a clean well and hot bread, and no one beat them in the mornings. Do Hwan accepted. 2 months later, a second merchant arrived. 4 months later, an official trade contract signed by the Admiral himself. So Ha-un checked every line. Choi Rin witnessed it. Aru stood behind Do Hwan with her sword in its sheath, just in case. The contract was fair, equal, the first in the Admiral's career in which the word equal appeared. Emily finished a complete map of the archipelago. Not just the northeastern sector, the entire archipelago. She had worked on it for a year, collecting data from every merchant and sailor who entered the bay. Comparing it, she checked it, she corrected it. The map was enormous, 2 by 3 meters, on tanned leather. Every island, every reef, every current, every trade route. She hung it in the council house, a new building in the center of the village, made of stone, with a large table and 6 chairs, for the 6 women who, together with Do Hwan, governed the island. Each was responsible for her own area. Yun Sa for the harbor and the sea, Choi Rin for the chronicles and diplomacy, Aru for security, Mi Ray for the shipyard and ships, So Ha-in for trade and the economy, Emily for maps and navigation, Do Hwan for everything else, for water pipes and stoves and filters and mills and doors with bolts. He declared Namdo a kingdom not for the sake of a title, but for the sake of the law, because an island is just land, but a kingdom is rules. So Ha-in wrote a trade code, 17 points on bamboo tablets at the pier. Every merchant read them, everyone knew them. Fixed prices, fair weights, a ban on the slave trade. Any person who set foot on Namdo soil was free, anyone, without exception. That was the 3rd point, the shortest, the most important. The Neko Ama sailed in and wept when they read it, because there was no other place in the archipelago where this was written, anywhere, on stone, on wood, on bamboo. Namdo was the first. One evening, Yunsa brought a group to Do Hwan, 6 Nekoama, young, all branded, all thin, one pregnant. They looked at him with that gaze he remembered, the one he'd seen 2 years ago in Yunsa's yellow eyes on the black sand. Fear, hope, disbelief. Yunsa stood before them and said, "This is Do Hwan, the lord of the island. He builds things. He doesn't buy people. If you want to stay, no one will touch you. Here, everyone has their own door, with a bolt on the inside." The 6 girls looked at the doors of the houses, at the bolts, at the well with clean water, at the rice drying on the stones, at the children playing between the houses, and one by one, they nodded. The pregnant Nekoama gave birth 2 months later, a boy, the first child born on Namdo. Che Rin wrote his name in the journal in a special handwriting. larger than usual. Do Hwan built a cradle, out of bamboo, with smooth edges, with a rocking mechanism on a rope suspension, an engineered cradle. The mother cried, not out of grief, because her child was born free. Trade was growing. 6 regular routes, 12 trading partners. Caravans of 3 ships sailed regularly. Salt, rice, flour, tableware, tools, maps. Namdo exported more than just goods. Namdo exported an idea that one can build without killing, that one can grow rich without plundering, that a lighthouse can shine for everyone. Merchants told the story. Sailors retold it. The rumor spread from island to island. There is a place, at the edge of the map, where rice is weighed fairly, where nekoama are not commodities, where doors are locked from the inside. So Haiyan reported on the profits, figures that a year ago seemed impossible for a ghost island. Do Hwan listened and nodded. Then he asked if there was enough food for everyone, if there was enough firewood for the winter, if there was enough fabric for clothes for the new residents. So Haiyan rolled her eyes. There is enough. Then she smiled, because he always asked about the people before he asked about the money, and that was exactly why the money kept coming. The Black Master hadn't disappeared, so Haiyan received news. His territory was growing. 5 islands, then 7, then 10, a fleet of 30 ships, with iron plating, with weapons the archipelago had never seen. He was moving north, slowly, methodically, swallowing island after island. Those who resisted were burned. Those who surrendered paid. Do Hwan read the reports and remained silent. He knew that sooner or later the 2 paths would cross, the path of chains and the path of swords, the path of the lighthouse and the path of fire. He wasn't afraid of this. He was preparing. He was expanding the fleet. Mire was laying the keel for the 4th slipway. The new ships were faster and stronger. Aru was training not only teenagers, adults, ship crews, not for attack, for defense. Yunsa and her divers patrolled the underwater approaches. Emily mapped out every new route, every bay, every strait. Knowledge of the waters is an advantage that cannot be bought with monocrystals. Cherian wrote letters to neighboring islands. She proposed trade alliances, not military ones, trade ones, because islands that trade with each other don't go to war with each other. It's no guarantee, but it's better than nothing. Late evening, 2 years and 1 day since the moment a gaunt body in a tattered shirt hit the water. Do Hwan sat on the eastern cliff, where he had sat on the first day. Only now the cliff was no longer wild. A stone staircase led upward, a landing with a stone bench, a lighthouse behind him. An oil lamp burned steadily. Its light fell on the water in a yellow streak, visible 20 miles away. Do Hwan looked out at the ocean, the same ocean that had tried to drown him, the same ocean that had brought him Yunsa, and Choirin, and Aru, and Mire, and Sohaun, and Emily, and Kana, and Tori, and Beson, and the 112 people who call this island home. He looked at his hands. In the light of the lighthouse, they were orange, calluses upon calluses, burns from the forge, scars from bamboo, cuts from tools, hands that built the first still from stone and resin, that dug the first well, molded the first crooked bowl, forged the first crooked nail, stretched the first bamboo pipe, built the first wall, raised the first mast, the hands of an engineer, not a warrior, not a king's, an engineer's. Yunsa climbed the stairs, quietly, like a cat, as always. She sat down next to him on the stone bench, shoulder to shoulder, silently, a bowl in her hands, rice, fried fish, seaweed, vegetables from the garden, still warm. She held it out. He took it. He ate slowly, not from fatigue, from a desire to stretch out the moment. She sat beside him. Her ears stood upright. Yellow eyes gazed at the ocean. 2 years ago, he'd pulled her from the shore, half dead, weighing less than a piglet, with a brand on her shoulder and rope scars on her wrists. Now sitting beside him was the harbor master, the woman to whom merchant captains bowed, the woman without a brand, because he had removed it from her system with a medicinal ointment 3 months ago. Yunsa stood there, holding her breath as the ointment soaked in and the brand faded. And then she breathed as if for the first time. Choi Rin came up from below with a journal. She sat down on the other side, opened a page, read the last entry aloud. Year 2, Day 366, Population 112, Ships 12, Harvest 4, Casualties 0. She closed the journal, placed it on her lap, looked out at the ocean. Aru got up next, stood behind Do Hwan, as always, her hand on the scabbard. Those very ones, repaired by his own hands. She didn't sit down, she stood, because that was right for her. Not like a guard, like a person who has chosen her place and stands her ground. Mireille came from the shipyard, wood shavings in her hair, a pencil behind her ear, her hands covered in tar. She sat down on the edge of the bench. She took out a ruler. She began to draw, even here, even now, because a new ship won't build itself. Do Hwan glanced at the drawing. 14 meters, 2 sails, the lines sharper than the previous ones. He nodded. A good ship. So Haun was the last to climb up. No abacus, no tablets, just her. A cold smile that had become familiar over the past 2 years, almost warm. She leaned against the lighthouse stone and folded her hands. She looked down at the bay, at the ships, at the lights of the houses, at the smoke from the bakery. She counted something in her head, out of habit. Emily sat a little way off, on a rock, a sketchbook on her lap. She was drawing them all, the 6 of them on the cliff, the lighthouse, the ocean, the flag. She drew quickly and precisely, line by line, like a map, only it wasn't a route map, it was a map of the moment. Hwan finished his rice. He set the bowl on the bench. Yoon-sa asked quietly, what was he thinking about? He was thinking about many things, about the Black Master moving north, about the new ships that needed to be laid down, about the 6th volume of the journal that Chaedin would start in a month, about the Nekoama child who had laughed for the first time today, about the door hinges that needed to be forged tomorrow, about the video on the solar desalinator that he had never finished in his past life, but had finished in this one. For real, not on camera, for the whole island. He replied. About tomorrow. Yoon-sa snorted. Aru nodded slightly. Chaedin smiled. Mireille wasn't listening. She was doodling. So Haun raised an eyebrow. Emily wrote the word in her notebook and circled it. The lighthouse was lit. Its light lay on the water as a long yellow streak and faded into the ocean. 12 ships in the bay rocked on the waves. The flag on the mast unfurled. A circle and 3 drops of water, white on blue. It's visible from the open ocean. Tomorrow new ships will arrive. Tomorrow new people will arrive. Tomorrow we'll have to build. Tomorrow we'll have to forge and saw and dig and cook rice and repair pipes and check the chains. Tomorrow the Black Master will be 1 day closer. But Namdo will also be 1 day stronger. Not with swords, with walls and rice and honest scales and a lighthouse that shines for everyone. The wind smells of salt and rice and smoke from the oven and resin from the shipyard and hot bread. Lee Do Hwan, an engineer from Busan, sat on the cliff of his island and looked out at the ocean. The ocean isn't angry. The ocean is busy. Just don't distract it with yourself. He didn't distract it. He built. Every day, every nail, every plank, every door with a bolt. And he would build tomorrow. 2 moons rose above the horizon, white and greenish, just like on the first night. Only now, a lighthouse burned beneath them, and a flag stood, and it smelled of bread. And 112 people slept behind doors that could only be locked from the inside.